A hand pinches a white ghost stone as someone finally realizes this is exactly how it all went down. The piece clicks onto the grid, locking in the next play. An older mobster in shades sweats over the board, complaining that his opponent's strategy makes zero logical sense. Instead of playing by the rules, a hand casually sweeps the stones away, wrecking the match like a sore loser flipping a Monopoly board. The man in shades loses his mind, shouting that a move like that shouldn't even exist in their world. The guy across from him stands there drenched in blood, flashing a psychotic smile that proves he's the one rewriting the rules. A whole squad of suited goons panics and charges at the smirking guy, screaming that this entire setup was rigged from the very beginning. To understand how a simple game turned into a mafia bloodbath, the clock rewinds 10 years to where the actual nightmare started. Meet 9-year-old Won Do-yoon, a kid rocking the kind of dead-eyed stare that usually belongs to a Soulsborne protagonist. He stands in the most rundown alleyway of his dilapidated neighborhood, watching normal kids walk to school while his own life is already permanently locked on hard mode. Do-yoon is basically playing life on legendary difficulty, acting as the sole provider and head of the household for his 8-year-old sister A-yoon. His daily grind in the slums usually involves a beat-up soccer ball flying across the pavement. The neighborhood kids scream at each other to intercept the pass and take Do-yoon down before he scores. They scramble after him, ordering their teammates to grab his shirt and stop his momentum by any means necessary. Do-yoon just jukes them out of their shoes like an esports pro smurfing in a bronze lobby, slamming the ball past a kid, who immediately catches heat from his team for dodging the shot. Despite the fancy footwork, our boy is well aware he is stuck at the absolute bottom of the social ladder. He knows exactly what it means to be the weakest link in a neighborhood built entirely on violence. One of the bullies flashes a missing tooth and tells Do-yoon to call it a day, throwing out a heavy-handed taunt about his parents coming to look for him. Do-yoon ignores the cruel orphan jab, flatly stating he put in his required playtime and demanding they finally leave him alone. Before he can even walk out of the alley, a polished dress shoe stomps down on his ball, while a new, menacing voice laughs and calls him a brat. The guy standing over the ruined ball is Kim Moo-won, a local gang boss who notes that our 9-year-old protagonist acts way too old for his actual age. He casually kicks the deflated ball over, telling Do-yoon to quit whining like a grumpy senior citizen and follow him before his friendly mood expires. Do-yoon hits him with an immediate, flat refusal. He shoots a nervous glare over his shoulder, explaining that he's already broke enough without adding mysterious mobster favors to his tab. Moo-won just waves off the attitude, laughing that Do-yoon's annoying stubbornness is exactly why he wants to hire him for a job. Sweating like an NPC realizing he just aggroed a high-level enemy, Do-yoon cautiously asks where exactly they are heading. They arrive at a set of concrete stairs, with the gangster claiming it's his warehouse while Do-yoon points out it just looks like a regular residential home. Moo-won flashes a shady grin, asking what kind of normal house is completely empty on the inside. Do-yoon realizes that the boss is entirely out of place in this rundown neighborhood, sticking out like a premium battle pass skin in a lobby full of default characters. They step inside the depressing, barren room, and Moo-won tells the kid to just grab a seat anywhere among the scattered cardboard boxes and trash bags. Moo-won strolls into the trashed apartment barefoot, complaining that dragging 2 kids around built up his appetite. Do-yoon ignores the small talk, demanding that the boss just hand over the work he promised. Tearing open a pack of spicy ramen with his teeth, Moo-won clarifies that he wasn't offering to share anyway. He piles the noodles on the counter and assigns Do-yoon his first official gang task, cleaning up the scattered laundry on the floor. Do-yoon just stares at him with the dead eyes of an underleveled NPC who just got handed the world's lamest fetch quest. Looking over his shoulder, Moo-won asks what the holdup is, reminding the kid that the payout is better than their last arrangement. He cracks a smirk and caves, agreeing to bump up the salary while calling Do-yoon a picky little brat for aggressively negotiating. The kid instantly gets to work scooping up the laundry, physically blocking his little sister from helping, because this is strictly his job to finish. She hovers right behind him, asking if doing some light housekeeping is really all he has to do to get paid. Moo-won walks out of the kitchen carrying a steaming pot, revealing that the chores were just the tutorial and ordering them to come eat. He sets up a makeshift dining table on a cardboard box, explaining that acting as his dinner buddy is a mandatory part of the contract. Moo-won drops some heavy life advice, informing the kid that nobody is supposed to eat alone. Right on cue, his sister's stomach growls loud enough to register on the Richter scale, prompting our young hustler to immediately offer up a payroll deduction to cover their meal. Moo-won just gives him a rough pat on the head, amused that this pint-sized contractor has a snappy financial comeback for literally everything. Checking his phone, the boss tells the kid to swing by and see a guy named Dong Shan before he clocks out for the night. The orphans finally dig into the ramen like they haven't seen carbs in a decade, while Moo-won explains that this next meeting is strictly business. He warns Do-yoon not to take the upcoming training too seriously, dropping the kind of ominous advice that usually means someone is about to get folded like a cheap lawn chair. Watching the kids inhale their dinner off a makeshift cardboard table, Moo-won sits back and marvels at the sheer grit packed into this tiny human. He realizes this pure survival instinct is just baked into the boy's DNA, leaving him wondering what kind of absolute menace this kid will eventually grow up to be. The promised training session introduces Do-yoon to Chu-dong San, a former MMA fighter serving as Moo-won's right-hand man who looks like he dry scoops pre-workout for breakfast. Dong Shan represents the local Gun-il clan, and he proves his welcoming hospitality by immediately swinging a heavy focus mitt right at the kid's skull. Do-yoon quickly realizes these guys aren't your average street thugs. Dong Shan catches the kid's punches with focus mitts like he's playing a casual game of Wii Sports boxing. After the impromptu sparring session, the ex-fighter hands Do-yoon a couple of hard-boiled eggs to keep his protein up. From there, the kid gets put through a full-on Rocky training montage, complete with concrete push-ups under the watchful eye of his new drill sergeant. Do-yoon balances the physical conditioning with an early morning paper route. He even manages to cram for school, while his mentor snoozes on the couch in the background. Every spare coin he earns gets shoved straight into a plastic water bottle that serves as the world's most depressing piggy bank. Grabbing his scuffed-up school uniform, Do-yoon thinks about everything the gang has put him through. He admits that, for better or worse, these guys taught him how to actually survive. Shouldering his battered backpack, he reflects that if his parents were still alive, he never would have had to speedrun childhood trauma and learn how heavy life could be at his age. Do-yoon drags himself into the gym, completely exhausted from his daily survival grind. He pants heavily, thinking he was finally seeing a sliver of hope after treating his life like a hardcore RPG run. The vibe instantly shatters when his coach barks at him to get over there, confirming the exact moment Do-yoon had been dreading. The coach demands to know what his problem is lately, accusing the kid of moving out there like he's lagging on a bad ping. Without letting him get a single word in, the coach brutally drops him from the roster for the next match. Do-yoon swallows his pride and respectfully accepts the unfair punishment. He turns away with a dark glare, mentally calling out the coach's garbage excuse. He knows his stamina isn't the issue, noting that the only heavy things around here are the coach's pockets from hoarding bribe money for a new ride. Walking toward the exit, Do-yoon tries to cope by telling himself this benching is actually a blessing in disguise. He reflects on how he used to be naive enough to believe the sports world was actually fair, right as a dark-haired girl glances back over her shoulder. Do-yoon fiddles with the gate lock, deciding that since this gym is just as rigged as everywhere else, he can safely rage quit without any regrets. His dramatic exit gets interrupted when a teammate shouts out to get the motherless kid's attention. A silver-haired lackey quickly chimes in to remind the group that Do-yoon is missing a dad too, and the whole squad cracks up over his total lack of parental figures. The red-haired ringleader, Sung-hyuk, who happens to be the Nepo baby of a massive syndicate director, brags about being generous enough to teach our clueless protagonist a lesson. Sung-hyuk flashes a mocking grin, spelling out that Do-yoon was benched purely because he is a broke orphan. He gestures to the active scrimmage, gloating that out of all 22 players on the dirt, Do-yoon is the only beggar pathetic enough to not bribe the coach. Instead of breaking down in tears like a CW teen drama character, Do-yoon just stares back with dead eyes and flatly thanks them for confirming his suspicions. He turns his back on the bullies and casually resumes unlocking the heavy padlock. Sung-hyuk stares at him in absolute disbelief, deeply offended that his grand villain monologue didn't even earn a flinch. Unable to handle the sheer disrespect, the rich kid violently jabs his finger into the back of Do-yoon's skull, slamming his forehead straight into the metal doorframe. Sung-hyuk completely loses it, screaming that Do-yoon's high and mighty attitude is disgusting. He grabs Do-yoon by the hair, making sure to rub in the fact that our boy wouldn't see a single second of playtime, even if he entirely emptied out his bank account. Getting right up in his face, the bully calls him a parasite for refusing to pay the coach's mandatory bribe tax. He makes sure to throw in a cheap shot about Do-yoon being an orphan who will never amount to anything in this league. Sung-hyuk starts aggressively poking him in the back of the head, mocking his entire existence. He pushes down even harder to watch Do-yoon tremble, laughing that it makes total sense why his parents abandoned him. Flashing a deeply punchable smirk, Sung-hyuk asks if Do-yoon seriously expects to survive on this roster. To add a little physical damage to the emotional trauma, he kicks Do-yoon straight into the metal door. Do-yoon absorbs the blow, quietly reminding the bully that he already heard the message loud and clear the first time. His eyes flare up like he just entered phase 2 of an Elden Ring boss fight, and he mutters about how totally pathetic it is for Sung Hyuk to flex his thug dad's money. Deciding his trial subscription to being a punching bag has officially expired, Do-yoon launches himself backward and delivers a devastating headbutt straight to Sung Hyuk's face. Do-yoon's headbutt lands perfectly, turning Sung Hyuk's nose into a crushed ketchup packet. The bully crashes into the dirt, and Do-yoon tells him to keep acting like a fool. His eyes flash red as he admits that beating this guy into the ground will definitely make him feel less guilty later. Treating Sung Hyuk's ribs like a FIFA penalty kick, Do-yoon winds up and boots him across the field. The gym teacher spots the beatdown and sprints over, screaming for them to stop. Do-yoon just glares down at his handiwork, deciding he is completely done playing nice. Fast forward a few days, and our boy is sitting in a disciplinary hearing looking like he just got caught griefing a Minecraft server. The committee reviews the incident, framing Do-yoon as a menace who ruthlessly assaulted his classmate. The head administrator announces that Do-yoon is stripped of his athlete status and officially expelled from the school. Do-yoon asks the room why he is taking the full punishment when the rich kids were the ones who jumped him first. Do-yoon glares daggers, demanding to know if he is getting thrown under the bus just because he spawned in without money or parents. He corners the teacher, asking if the school is rigging the rules just because his bully has the massive Daejeon group paying for the premium battle pass. The teacher drops his nervous act and flashes a greasy smirk, mocking whatever useless moral lessons schools try to teach these days. He tells Do-yoon to just accept his miserable place in the food chain and bails out the door. Wandering home alone at sunset, Do-yoon reflects on how literal thugs hijacked the country years ago. He explains that street gangs started extorting citizens for protection money, eventually evolving into untouchable corporate syndicates like Daejeon. A toxic peace settled over the city, leaving regular guys without connections to swallow their pride and multiply at the absolute bottom of the ladder. The crushing weight of the injustice finally breaks him, and tears start streaming down his bruised face. He aggressively scrubs his eyes with his sleeve, refusing to throw a full pity party in the middle of the street. Balling his hand into a fist, he realizes this completely rigged system is the exact reason his entire future was just destroyed. Do-yoon realizes the game was rigged against him since the tutorial level. He marches right up to a sketchy, blood-stained door that looks like the entrance to a Resident Evil save room. Pushing it open, he knows he has to wipe out the entire food chain, from the corporate overlords down to the local street thugs. Heading down the dark concrete stairs, he decides the only way to settle his old debts is to completely demolish the establishment. He steps into a dingy hideout full of hired muscle, fully planning to beat them using the exact same logic of power they used to ruin his life. The head honcho looks up from the couch and asks why Do-yoon is glaring at him like he just corrupted his 100-hour Elden Ring save file. The surrounding goons just stare, completely oblivious to the threat standing in their break room. Dropping to one knee, Do-yoon unzips his backpack to reveal 2 massive jugs of highly flammable liquid, announcing that this represents his entire net worth and easily covers double his debt. The boss looks completely lost and reminds the kid that he never actually loaned him a single dime. Do-yoon's eyes go dead cold as he explains that he just calculated the exact market value of all the sketchy jobs and pathetic meals they threw his way, and he is finally ready to settle the tab. The boss leans forward, completely fed up, and tells Do-yoon to keep his cash and bounce before he does something monumentally stupid. Clenching his fist, Do-yoon insists this is the final settlement for his past, and begs the man to just accept the payout. The boss slumps back, warning our boy that his patience is running on fumes and making it clear this isn't some playground where he can drop wild demands. Staring down the boss, Do-yoon announces he has something entirely real to propose. Dropping his bag of flammable liquid, he hits a perfect 90-degree bow and asks the guy to legally adopt him, speedrunning his way into an organized crime family like he's trying to unlock a secret ending in a Yakuza game. Peeking up through his bangs with a lethal glare, he promises that in exchange for the paperwork, he will hand over the one prize his new dad has never managed to claim. The entire room of hired muscle just stares in stunned silence at the high schooler bowing in front of their coffee table. Staring at the kid's back, the boss mutters that he always wondered how Do-yoon would turn out, only to realize he just got taller without actually growing a brain. A shadow falls over the boss's eyes as he smirks and asks if this punk actually thinks he knows what a man of his stature truly desires. Without missing a beat, Do-yoon guarantees he can deliver the head of the gun, Raklan. Yoon stares up with glowing red eyes, promising that the next time they cross paths, he will be carrying some heavy cargo. He clarifies that he intends to deliver the severed head of the Ganri gang leader, guaranteeing the kill like a sweaty try, hard locking in his mane. The boss sits there silently, prompting Yoon to swear he has a flawless track record for keeping his word, just like the old man sitting in front of him. Amused by the sheer audacity, the boss points out that Yoon just spawned in out of nowhere, acting totally polite while pitching absolute nonsense. He zeroes in on the kid and asks why he even bothered pitching an offer he knew would get rejected. Yoon simply points a finger down and states as a matter of fact that the boss is going to say yes anyway. Genuinely baffled by this kid's maxed out delusion stat, the boss asks why he was chosen as the lucky adoptive father. Yoon keeps a lethal poker face and asks if there is anyone else out there who could actually handle taming him. He narrows his eyes and drops the real bait, declaring that the boss is the only man on the board capable of taking down Daejeong. Hearing that specific name immediately shifts the boss's posture, and he leans back on the couch to ask what makes this high schooler so sure of that. Yoon smiles and explains that he actually saw the boss and his crew fight firsthand. Taking a drag from his cigarette, the boss pieces together that this must have happened right after Yoon moved into their district. Thinking back to that night, the boss sighs, admitting he doesn't even know what sparked the turf war to begin with. He remembers his own men looking completely exhausted and outmatched. Correcting his memory, he points out that just 2 guys from his crew did all the heavy lifting, swinging wooden planks and tearing through the opposition like high-level smurfs in a bronze-ranked lobby. He notes that this stood their ground against an entire mob armed to the teeth with pipes and chainsaws. The pair systematically dismantled the gang, using bare fists and a stolen hammer to clear the street. Every strike landed with sickening force, splattering blood across the pavement. The boss remembers how they left the alleyway completely paved with bodies, refusing to give a single enemy the chance to run away. It turns out a younger Yoon and a girl were hiding right around the corner the whole time, watching the brutal street sweeping unfold with terrified eyes. Yoon states that he saw the whole massacre with his own 2 eyes and could never forget it. The boss looks completely lost, asking if that bloodbath actually happened. The 2 legendary fighters from the flashback, Bang Taeju and Chu Dongseon, stand there looking like they completely forgot they once wiped out an entire server of goons by themselves. Han Sangjae leans in to jog the boss's memory, reminding him about the time a rival boss sent a mob of construction thugs as a twisted welcoming committee, right after their crew got exiled to this run-down district. The boss rubs his temples, cutting off the history lesson and asking Yoon if that little trip down memory lane satisfies his curiosity. Instead of backing down, Yoon turns toward the exit to drop a final warning. He casually mentions that he has zero intention of stopping his current grind. The metal door slams shut behind him, leaving the room in heavy silence. Dongseon stares at the exit and asks his boss what their next move is. He points out the harsh reality that their tiny, exiled crew simply doesn't have the resources to take in a kid pulling this much aggro. The boss leans his head back, silently deciding he completely disagrees with his subordinate's panic. He thinks to himself that a guy with Yoon's stats doesn't belong in their crew, or any underground syndicate for that matter. Sprawled out on the sofa like he just quit a 12-hour ranked session, he grumbles that the kid should have just kept his head down for 2 more years. He admits he basically raised the boy as his own flesh and blood, but he never expected the kid to actually try and claim the family title. His mind drifts back to the old days, remembering the exact moment the boy swore he wanted to follow in the old man's footsteps. The little guy had cheerfully announced his dream of growing up to be just like his dad, waving his hand in the air like an NPC handing out a tutorial quest. Snapping back to the present, the boss decides the kid has officially lost the plot by spouting all this nonsense out of nowhere. He scoffs at the whole adopted son routine, shifting uncomfortably on the cushions. Digging into his past, he pulls open the flaps of a dusty cardboard box and mutters that it's been way too long. Inside sits a stash of old-school supplies and a framed graduation photo, proving this grizzled gang leader has secretly been hoarding sentimental dad loot this entire time. A massive truck skids across the asphalt, leaving nothing behind but a bloody shoe. The fatal accident puts 2 victims in funeral frames. Manager Kim Moo, one attends the wake in his mourning armband, staring blankly ahead as the weight of the loss sets in. The corporate higher-ups complain that his grieving process led to a long-term neglect of his duties, tanking the department's overall performance. They glare from the shadows with glowing red eyes, looking less like a board of directors and more like the final boss council in a Persona dungeon. Because corporate loyalty is a myth, they hit him with an official transfer notice, demoting him from his spot on Team 1. Mu-1 packs up the dreaded cardboard box of shame and is officially booted from the main building. He walks down the sterile hallway without a single word of protest. He isn't the only one taking the fall, as his loyal subordinates get dragged down right alongside him. The company exiles them to a rundown branch in Guncheong-dong, passing down a mandate to secure all local sectors. Standing in the middle of their dusty new office, Mu-1 grips his box with a faint smirk, ready to treat this dead and demotion like a new Game Plus run. The subordinates are already stuck on janitor duty, hauling heavy furniture and scrubbing down their rundown new branch office. One of the demoted team members trudges into a gloomy room, carrying his entire corporate life in a single cardboard box. He aggressively glares at the official personnel notice detailing their one-way ticket to the bottom of the corporate ladder. Deciding he completely rejects these real-life patch notes, he violently crushes the document into a ball. He slumps onto the couch in pitch darkness, hitting rock bottom like a finance bro who just watched his crypto portfolio flatline. Over in another room, manager Mu-1 lets out a heavy sigh while leaning against his own pathetic packing box. He quietly grumbles to himself that his subordinate always manages to find a way under his skin. A sharp double knock suddenly pulls him out of his brooding session. A voice from the hallway breaks the silence, identifying himself as team leader Song Jae. Completely ignoring basic door etiquette, Song Jae announces he is coming in and pushes the door wide open. Song Jae walks in acting like the party's cleric, claiming he brought medicine to fix the mood. The healing items turn out to be cheap bottles of soju, and he pops a squat on the floor to ask Mu-1 for the full debrief. Song Jae cracks his drink and mentions that a kid just got expelled for turning the local Daejeong school into his personal fight club after finally snapping on his bullies. Mu-1 accepts a bottle, completely unsurprised, admitting it was only a matter of time since the kid's life has been pure hell lately. He zeroes in on his team leader, questioning if A-Yoon was the one who leaked the intel. Song Jae confirms her as the source, pointing out that the troublemaker has always been completely unpredictable. They clink their bottles together, and Mu-1 asks what the game plan is now that the kid is making major waves. Song Jae gets dead serious, explaining that with the kid's insane resolve, if they don't recruit him, he's guaranteed to end up running with a much more dangerous crowd. Mu-1 chugs his soju, agreeing that they need to draft him before some street-level thugs get their hands on him and completely ruin his potential. He sets the glass down and asks if the rest of the squad is actually on board with this rescue mission. Song Jae points out that Dong Sean is already throwing a tantrum trying to draft the kid into the pro fighting scene. He argues Do-yoon has way too much potential to just settle for standard arena brawls. Swirling his soju, Song Jae figures their best play is keeping the kid on a tight leash so he doesn't wander into the wrong aggro radius. Mu-1 respects the cold logic, chilling on the floor with his own bottle of liquid coping mechanism. He insists on hearing the kid out directly to gauge his actual ambition and see how far he's willing to push things. Mu-1 immediately demands to know who is currently running surveillance on their prospect. Song Jae whips out a classic flip phone, asking if he should order Yamdu-jin to drag the kid in for a chat. Giving a stern nod, Mu-1 stresses that they need to speedrun this extraction before a rival named Choi Dae-yep snatches up their SR-tier recruit. A sudden vibration interrupts them, prompting Mu-1 to throw up a hand to pause the briefing. Pressing his own ancient hardware to his ear, he asks his contact if he's currently at home, getting a quick confirmation from the other end. Mu-1 wraps up his phone call, telling whoever is on the other line to tag along with him for a little bit. Do-yoon glares out from under his dark hood with glowing red eyes, looking completely locked in and ready to crash out at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, outside a dingy local bar, a low-level thug whines to his boss about leaving the party early when he's just starting to get a decent buzz going. He reminds the big guy that they are supposed to be celebrating his massive transfer to headquarters, but the boss just tells his useless goons to stay behind and keep drinking on his dime. The lackeys immediately start sweating over the idea of defying the Daejeong syndicate, panicking that the massive organization isn't exactly a crew they should casually ignore. When one of the guys offers to act as a bodyguard for the walk home, the big man snaps back, asking if they seriously think he'd get backstabbed in his own rundown territory. He tells them to just relax and enjoy the free booze, prompting his subordinate to drop a perfect 90-degree bow like he just got gifted a tier 3 sub on Twitch. The boss walking away into the night is Choi Dae-yop, head of the Gonripa gang that manages the second worst slum in the entire district. The second he's out of earshot, his tough guy facade drops and he grumbles about rotting in this dump for years, wondering what his men even think they are celebrating. Looking down at his scuffed shoes, He mutters the grim truth that he didn't secure a fancy transfer at all, but actually just got demoted to the absolute worst neighborhood on the map. Daeop curses under his breath about playing neighborhood thug games like some low-level NPC. He scoffs at the idea of his so-called headquarters transfer, fully aware he's just getting aggressively demoted. To properly express his frustration, he unleashes a high-pressure stream of disrespect. He aims directly at a police booth under the streetlights, whining about the massive pile of garbage his higher-ups are dumping on his plate. Zipping up his pants, he grumbles that things were actually way better back when the local cops were the ones making his life miserable. He pulls out a pack of smokes to take the edge off, instantly snapping at the sound of footsteps creeping up behind him. His bowl-cut underling ignores the attitude and offers him a light, pointing out that the boss has been drinking heavy tonight. Daeop asks why the rookie didn't just stay inside to party with the rest of the crew, but the kid admits he'd rather freeze out here smoking with his superior. Touched by the blind loyalty, Daeop playfully grabs the kid's shoulder and says they should grab one more drink together before heading back inside. Before they can even take a drag, a mysterious voice calls out Daeop's name from the darkness and completely flatlines the wholesome bonding moment. The two gangsters turn around to find a lone, hooded figure blocking the alleyway like an Elden Ring boss waiting right past the fog gate. Do-yoon finally corners his target in the alley, locking on with glowing red eyes and asking if he is staring at the infamous Choi Daeop. Daeop completely ignores the threat to get his cigarette lit by his lackey, asking what kind of stray NPC just wandered into their path. His subordinate steps up with a dead-eyed stare, offering to take out the trash himself. Daeop waves him off, stepping forward to handle the interruption personally since his ego is already bruised from his recent demotion. He towers over the hooded kid, taking a long drag of his cigarette and demanding to know who he is dealing with. Squinting through the smoke, the gangster is genuinely baffled to realize he is getting pressed by a literal teenager. He lets out a heavy sigh, asking if this wandering brat is actively trying to ruin an adult's already miserable night. Pointing his cigarette like a weapon, Daeop gives the kid one free pass to scurry home before his alcohol buzz wears off and things get violent. Do-yoon is entirely unfazed, warning the gangster that whenever he loses his temper, he never settles things peacefully with a conversation. The standoff locks in at the bottom of the concrete stairs, setting the stage perfectly for a low-level Yakuza street encounter. Daeop raises an eyebrow, asking if the kid has any plans on leaving before things get ugly. Do-yoon just stares right back, stating he has some lost property to collect. With his eyes glowing like a fresh pair of Sith Lord contacts, he suggests they have a little chat. Daeop takes a drag of his cigarette, repeating the word like he's never heard of a peaceful conversation in his life. Do-yoon reminds the older guy about his own rules, demanding a proper justification for what's about to go down. Daeop gives him a street cred history lesson, explaining that modern gangsters can't just throw hands like a WWE SmackDown because the big corporate syndicates are always watching them. Do-yoon checks his wrist like he's late for a server raid, wondering aloud since when street thugs started caring about corporate HR policies. He announces that he decided to go out and hunt down that justification himself. He lays out the math, explaining that he grinded for 3 years at 3 different syndicate businesses, but got scammed out of 80% of his loot. As Do-yoon insists these cold hard facts are all the excuse he needs to start swinging, Daeop just chuckles, completely amused to find out this whole dramatic standoff is really just over a missed paycheck. Daeop takes a drag from his cigarette and suggests Do-yoon take up his payroll issues directly with the teachers. Turning his back on the kid, he warns him not to act tough for nothing and orders him to scram. Do-yoon just lets out a heavy sigh, pointing out that he obviously wouldn't have come all the way out here if he planned on backing down. Daeop glances back over his shoulder, muttering that this guy has completely lost his grip on reality. Closing the distance, the older guy demands to know if Do-yoon even comprehends what the word justification means. He completely loses his cool, screaming that the kind of revenge Do-yoon wants requires sacrificing anywhere from a handful of lives to hundreds of them. He aggressively tosses his cigarette aside like a rage-quitting gamer throwing a controller. The ember shatters against the wall in a shower of sparks as Daeop yells that nobody starts a massive blood feud over a few measly bucks. Gritting his teeth, he firmly states that there is absolutely nothing in this place that can help him. A scuffed-up police emblem sits on the wall, completely tarnished, as Daeop makes it crystal clear that Do-yoon won't find salvation anywhere else. Daeop adjusts his cuffs, admitting that since Do-yoon is the first guy to stroll into his turf without shaking in his boots, he gave him a temporary pass. Do-yoon completely ignores the villain monologue to check his watch, casually noting that Daeop is a massive lightweight who talks way too much when he is drunk. Scratching his head like he is trying to solve a basic math problem, Yoon asks if the mob boss is really trying to say a little financial scamming isn't enough justification for a bloodbath. His casual attitude completely drops as he asks how human trafficking of orphans works for justification instead. A flashback hits, showing a very young Yoon trapped in a dingy, unfurnished room with nothing but a giant water bottle and a book to keep him company. Heavy footsteps echo from the hallway, pulling his attention away from his reading session. Outside, the local thugs complain about people using their rundown neighborhood as a literal dumping ground for unwanted kids. A shady guy with a chin, diaper mask slides open the door, thrilled to discover that someone actually left a kid in the room this time. The terrified boy huddles under his blanket and asks who the intruder is, but the trafficker just prices him at 3 big bills like he just pulled a rare holographic Pokémon card. He violently yanks the kid by his hair, warning the screaming boy that he would beat some sense into him right now if he wasn't considered valuable merchandise. One of the traffickers restrains young Yoon, ordering his partner to keep the merchandise pristine by just taping his mouth and wrists. The second kidnapper unrolls the duct tape with all the confidence of a level 1 crook on an escort mission, nervously reminding his buddy that they are total rookies at this. Seizing the opening, Yoon breaks loose and sprints past the guy, shouting that he isn't even from this neighborhood. The rookie kidnapper panics and reflexively delivers a brutal knee strike straight into the kid's chest. Yoon crumples to the dirt, gasping for air while the trafficker sighs and complains about how sketchy the area is. He casually dusts off his jacket, whining that kids these days have zero respect for the unspoken rules of being forcibly abducted. The first kidnapper finishes zipping up a massive suitcase, telling his boss they need to grab their payday and bounce. The boss quickly agrees, wanting to get out of Dodge before the locals catch on to their little operation. The subordinate hesitates, suddenly realizing they left a glaring loose end. He stares at Yoon's motionless body on the pavement and asks what exactly they are supposed to do with the kid now. The suited thug ruthlessly stomps on the unconscious kid, demanding to know what else they are supposed to do with him. His partner panics, arguing that he really doesn't want things to escalate to corpse disposal levels tonight. Young Yoon just lies completely motionless on the cold concrete. Looming over his limp body, the traffickers rationalize their crime, stating that the district locals simply rounded up abandoned kids to sell them off for a quick paycheck. Back in the present, a fully grown Yoon asks Daeop if that tragic little backstory is enough to make his point. The older mobster stares back with wide eyes, realizing Yoon is using that exact trafficking ring as the perfect political excuse for his gang to conquer the territory. Daeop pauses, second-guessing if this flimsy justification will actually hold up against the rival bosses. Yoon just flashes a menacing smirk, treating a hostile gang takeover with the same casual indifference as picking a drop spot in Fortnite. Realizing negotiations have officially failed, Daeop cracks his jaw and braces for a fight. He doesn't even get to finish his thought before Yoon entirely closes the gap, launching a massive right hook straight for his skull. Daeop decides he has heard enough excuses and charges in with a heavy right hook, but Yoon easily weaves backward. Yoon's eyes light up red like he just activated his devil trigger, and he lunges right back into the fray with a massive grin. He buries his fist directly into Daeop's ribs. Daeop gasps for air, hacking up spit as the wind gets completely knocked out of him. Yoon doesn't give him a single frame of recovery time, winding up a devastating counterattack. He delivers a brutal flying knee to Daeop's chest, launching him backward with enough force to wring out a Smash Bros. Character. Daeop's eyes bug out of his skull as the stun lock kicks in. He ragdolls face, first onto the pavement while a bystander just stands there watching his boss get completely folded. Yoon casually checks his smartwatch, complaining that Daeop wasted way too much time running his mouth. He flashes a smirk, noting to himself that he barely beat the clock. A polished leather shoe steps onto the pavement as a new voice points out that Yoon's obsession with justification makes perfect sense now. The newcomer is a massive dude in a suit rocking glowing red eyes, and he admits the kid has finally caught his attention. Without warning, the suit lunges in with a haymaker so heavy Yoon has to cross both arms just to eat the impact. The raw kinetic force sends Yoon skidding backward across the concrete past Daeop's unconscious body like he just took a Smash Bros. Smash attack at high percentage. Peeking out from under his defensive guard, Yoon's own eyes flash crimson as he advises the giant not to drag things out next time. He casually grabs a fistful of the guy's sleeve, adding that he highly doubts they will ever see each other again anyway. The suit tries to rip his arm away, demanding to know what Yoon thinks he's doing. The big guy's glowing eyes widen in absolute confusion as Do Yoon announces that time is officially up. Flashing a sinister smile, Do Yoon disrespectfully palms the top of the man's head like a basketball, declaring that the legendary Gwisang Yu is about to take his second ever L. The giant's face completely drops at the mention of the word second, looking like somebody just read his exact IP address aloud in a public lobby. Do Yoon locks in with glowing red eyes, throwing the giant's own words right back in his face like a flawless reverse play. He gets a solid fistful of the man's hair, casually announcing that their current neighborhood is about to get permanently wiped off the map. The suit violently demands to be released, but Do Yoon just uses his head as a human battering ram to launch him backward. Following a massive crash, Do Yoon calmly reminds his opponent that he already gave him a fair warning. Sliding his stance forward, Do Yoon activates full-blown dad mode, warning the monster to never touch his kid again. Standing over his target like a second-phase Elden Ring boss, he promises to physically gouge the man's eyes out. His expression twists into pure rage as he repeats the threat with a few extra curses, just in case the guy didn't comprehend the eye-gouging itinerary the first time. Meanwhile, a scruffy guy fields a phone call about a mandatory company dinner celebrating his recent transfer to headquarters, asking for the meetup spot. He pushes himself out of his armchair, verifying the address by a local brick house near the embankment road. He tightly grips his prehistoric flip phone, clearly gearing up for a night that involves zero actual dining. Chu Dong-san, a former fighter rocking full tattoo sleeves, asks his boss if Do Yoon is finally making an appearance. He immediately volunteers to tag along, eager to get in on the action. But his boss shuts that down instantly, ordering him to stay put in the room like he just assigned an NPC to guard duty. The boss brushes off the threat entirely, casually mentioning that they are only dealing with the Guncheong 2 Dong area. Dong Shan hits a crisp 90-degree bow, wishing his boss a safe trip as the man heads out solo. Back out on the freezing streets, Do Yoon marches forward with glowing red eyes like a Dark Souls boss entering Phase 2, reminding the guy that he gave him fair warning. The large man freezes in a cold sweat as Do Yoon promises to permanently revoke his seeing privileges if he ever touches his kid again. The battered man desperately questions why Do Yoon is going to such extreme lengths over this specific child. Staring up into the streetlights, Do Yoon admits he didn't exactly have a complex, philosophical answer for that. He just locks eyes with the guy and calls him an ignorant piece of garbage, explaining that he is doing all this simply because the boy is his son. The real reason everyone is terrified is that unhinged, glowing red look in his eyes, making him seem like an Elden Ring boss that just hit his second phase. The guy in the suit looks at his unconscious buddies on the floor and tries to play the moral high ground, insisting that the boy involved is just a kid. Do Yoon stands tall with his hands in his pockets, telling the suit to get a grip on reality. The thug completely loses his cool, cursing and yelling that there is no such thing as a kid in their line of work. Do Yoon grits his teeth, firing back that the suit is the brain-dead bastard who actually needs a wake-up call. He warns the guy that running his mouth will only get him treated like garbage, right as he swats away an incoming grab. The suit calls Do Yoon a moron and throws a massive right hook, but our boy leans back to dodge it completely. Slipping past the attack, Do Yoon decides to change up his strategy and promises not to target the guy's eyes this time. He drops into a solid stance and casually threatens to go full Mike Tyson and rip the guy's ear off instead. Completely ignoring the warning, the suit charges forward blindly, desperate to finally land a hit. The big guy throws a heavy haymaker, but Do Yoon casually blocks it with his forearm like he's parrying a low-level mob. The thug's face scrunches up in pure confusion as he violently hiccups from the impact. Do Yoon doesn't give him a single frame to recover before launching his counter. He plants a clean strike straight into the guy's face, sending a spray of blood into the night air. The thug's pupils shrink to pinpricks as his brain immediately resets to factory settings. Do Yoon follows up with a rapid-fire combo, pushing his opponent back with a flurry of blurred strikes. His eyes glow a menacing red from the shadows, fully locking into raid boss mode. Desperate to turn the tide, the big guy swings a wild right hook while taunting Do Yoon about getting demoted because of someone else's mess. The punch lands square on Do Yoon's chest, but he completely tanks the damage without flinching, leaving the thug staring at him in utter disbelief. Slipping right past his open guard, Do Yoon ducks in close to deliver the actual punishment. Do Yoon cashes in on his opening with a vicious uppercut right under the giant's bearded chin. Blood spews from the man's mouth as his head snaps back from the sheer force of the impact. Instead of going down, the giant just resets his stance, forcing Do Yoon to wind up for another swing. He steps straight into the pocket and throws his entire body weight behind a massive right hook. His fist collides squarely with the guy's face, hitting hard enough to send a normal mob straight back to the spawn screen. Do Yoon's expression drops into pure shock when he realizes the brute completely ate the damage without even flinching. He immediately scrambles backward to create some space, cursing out the absolute unit standing in his way. Dripping with sweat, Do Yoon asks if the guy seriously has no idea why he ended up getting demoted in the first place. The man glares down at him with glowing red raid boss eyes, asking if Do Yoon is finally starting to get scared. Crouching into a defensive stance, Do Yoon spits back a harsh insult in a desperate attempt to hide his rising panic. The large man flexes his chest hard enough to strain his dress shirt, announcing that he has waited a full decade for this exact moment. He lunges forward, swearing that today is the day he finally destroys his opponent. A massive spectral hammerhead shark manifests behind him as his eyes glow crimson, boasting that his old underworld title as the ear-shredding shark hasn't faded away. He locks onto his target, fully convinced he is about to trigger a sweaty Elden Ring boss phase. Instead, the bearded fighter completely ignores the shark weak production and instantly counters with a crippling right hook that caves in the man's face. The young bystander watches in pure disbelief as the 10-year revenge plan crumbles in a single frame. The self-proclaimed apex predator gets launched backward into the night air, his consciousness instantly deleted by the impact. He crashes onto the wet concrete and goes completely limp. The victor just stands over the bleeding body with a completely blank expression, entirely unfazed by the encounter. He reaches down and aggressively yanks the unconscious man up by his collar, reminding him that he already warned him this would happen. Following through on his earlier threat, our guy sinks his teeth straight into the big man's ear, promising to rip it clean off this time like a feral Mike Tyson. The giant screams in agony as his opponent turns his cartilage into a chew toy. Watching from the sidelines, an observer notes that regardless of the beef's origin story, Kim Moo-won always walks away with the victory screen. He smirks, pointing out the sweet irony that Choi Dae-op, a guy notorious for collecting other people's ears, just became the victim of his own signature move. The massive brawler is dumped onto his back in the dirt, bringing their long-standing grudge to a pathetic close. The young spectator realizes the victor operates with zero hesitation, possessing a ruthless clarity about exactly what needs to be done. Spitting out a mouthful of blood and flesh, the winner proves he doesn't just keep his promises, he leaves a brutal physical reminder so his enemies never forget. Sitting back on the pavement, the observer admits that the actual blow of the brawl was completely irrelevant since the final outcome was hard-coded from the start. He watches the fighter stride forward, acknowledging that this absolute finality is simply Kim Moo-won's way of doing business. Extending a hand downward, the victor cements his status as a man truly worthy of claiming the #1 spot on the server leaderboard. The kid watching from the sidelines decides that if anyone can warp reality like a main character, it is Do Yoon. Meanwhile, the older guy stands there with his lower face completely painted red, asking why Do Yoon is leaving him hanging on a handshake. They finally clasp hands, but the guy immediately gets defensive and asks why Do Yoon is staring holes into his soul. Do Yoon flatly points out that the dude is wearing fresh blood around his mouth like the newest shade of MAC lipstick. The guy casually smears the mess across his chin with his thumb and asks if he is presentable now. Do Yoon reminds him that smudging raw bodily fluids into his pores does not exactly fix the hygiene issue. Deciding he has hit his socializing limit for the evening, the older man turns his back and suggests they leave. Do Yoon tells him to pump the brakes for a second. Throwing up a lazy wave, the guy says he is taking off first and tells Do Yoon to fire up his Uber app to find his own way back. Ignoring the rude exit, Do Yoon crouches down and snags a bloody prize off the pavement. He stares blankly at the freshly detached human ear in his palm, inspecting it like a low-tier Skyrim loot drop. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of a standard office ceiling, someone brings up the topic of a recent debt collection mission. Back at the office, the older guy kicks back on the couch and asks if Do Yoon stirred up all this drama just to create some kind of justification for his actions. Rubbing his temples, he wonders out loud why kids these days are so unbelievably reckless. He admits he can't figure out if Do Yoon is actually a tactical genius or just completely brain dead for pulling a Leroy Jenkins and diving headfirst into trouble. After running the mental math, the boss decides that cutting ties with the kid is the only logical play here. Do Yoon tells him to stop overcooking his brain with all these wild theories. He states flat out that he was just keeping a promise, plain and simple. The older man sarcastically agrees before dropping the rumor that a guy named Choi Dae-op is heading back to headquarters. Since their own mutual agreement is officially busted, he advises Do Yoon to just take the L, quit the business, and go back to high school. He assures the kid that even with his violent track record, There has to be at least one desperate school in the Guncheong neighborhood willing to enroll him. Do Yoon shoots that idea down immediately, asking why he would ever subject himself to the torture of public education. Do Yoon reaches into his jacket pocket to deliver his final assignment. He reveals a heavily pixelated, bloody ear in his palm like he just looted a questionable quest item in Skyrim, claiming it totally counts as the severed head his boss ordered. He argues his own twisted biology, stating that since an ear is technically attached to a skull, he fulfilled his end of the bargain. Clenching his fist, Do Yoon doubles down on this logic, declaring that just like the ear is bound to the head, he permanently belongs to the Gunilpa gang. He proudly announces himself as Kim Moo-won's son, cementing his place in the organization. The boss drops his head, utterly defeated by this kid's stubbornness. Massaging his temples to fend off a massive migraine, he mutters under his breath about how ridiculous this whole situation is. He looks back up at Do Yoon and asks why he is throwing his future away for this life. He demands to know why the kid insists on entering the criminal underworld, and more importantly, why his very own son has to be the one doing it. Unfazed by the parental disappointment, Do Yoon stands tall and announces he has two main goals driving him forward. Staring him down with the cold intensity of a Sasuke-Uha revenge arc, he reveals his first objective is to completely drag down every single rotten bastard at the top. Do Yoon declares his plan to dive into places far lower than his current standing. He explains that whether it ends up being a stepping stone or the final result, he has a massive target in mind. His dad stares back looking completely blue-screened as Do Yoon drops the bombshell that his actual plan is to put his father at the absolute top of the food chain. Do Yoon locks eyes with him, making it crystal clear that crowning his old man as Kingpin is his next main quest. Sometime later, a heavily tattooed bruiser is casually leaning against a set of uncomfortably bloody double doors like he is guarding a final boss room. Do Yoon steps through the doorway, letting out a confused grunt when he notices this human brick wall waiting for him. The guy does not even bother with a proper introduction, just glancing over his shoulder and ordering Do Yoon to follow him. The two head out into the quiet city night. As they walk down a dimly lit alley, Do Yoon asks if they are heading back to the embankment for another sketchy underworld meetup. But instead of some shady waterfront execution spot, their ominous trek ends right in front of a completely normal, brightly lit neighborhood convenience store. The tattooed guy casually offers Do Yoon a bright blue popsicle, because nothing handles the tension of organized crime like a frozen treat. He asks his new companion why he is suddenly trying to throw his future away by joining the Gunilpa syndicate. Snatching the peace offering, Do Yoon explains that his fate was basically locked in from the character creation screen. He chomps straight into the solid ice and admits that no matter how hard he tries to play it safe, he is destined to end up right here anyway. The older gangster stares back in heavy silence. He tells the kid to stay out of the dangerous criminal shadows unless he has a massive, unavoidable reason. Tapping Do Yoon on the chest, the guy points out that he is practically built for a UFC main event. Do Yoon blushes like a rookie getting noticed by a veteran, especially when the older man admits he wasted his own fighting potential, but believes the kid can still go pro. Flashing a surprisingly wholesome smile while biting into his own popsicle, the tattooed man advises him to stop overthinking and let the actual adults handle the heavy underworld problems. But Do Yoon's eyes instantly harden into a deadly glare as he fires back that his childhood is already dead and gone. Do Yoon stares the tattooed man down, insisting that if he sits on the sidelines, nothing is ever going to change. He remembers his father's old lectures about how learning to throw a punch wasn't a free pass to solve every problem with his fists. He admits he knows violence isn't the answer, sounding like a gamer who just skipped the tutorial because he already knows the combat controls. But he quickly calls out the hypocrisy, pointing out that Moo-won and the older syndicate members are gearing up for the exact same thing. He holds up his blue popsicle and labels their upcoming mission for what it really is. Chomping straight through the solid ice like a menace, he declares that he has to get his own payback too. The massive enforcer turns his ink-covered back, taking in the kid's reckless stubbornness. Pointing his popsicle stick like a tiny wooden sword, Do Yoon makes it crystal clear that his only goal is revenge. Standing under the streetlights, the giant warns him that the top brass has already handed down official orders. Refusing to be sidelined, Do Yoon reminds the guy that Kim Moo-won is his father, officially turning this mob war into family business. Dong-sin violently crumples up his piece of trash, clearly stressed out by the stubborn kid's death wish. He tosses it into the bin, wishing he could just drag and drop Do Yoon's terrible life choices into the recycle bin along with it. Meanwhile, an older bearded guy is chilling on a couch chewing a toothpick like a retired GTA protagonist, asking through the door if Dong-sin is around. Dongsan steps inside and hits a flawless 90-degree bow while the boss asks if Do-yoon finally took off. Straightening his posture, the tattooed enforcer confirms the kid made it to his destination in one piece. The boss leans forward with a heavy sigh, reflecting on how completely sideways the boy's situation has gotten. He then asks his subordinate to explain his reasoning, wanting to know why he let the kid walk away to do something so reckless. The older man's expression darkens as he admits that even if Do-yoon isn't his actual flesh and blood, he still cares about his fate. Dong-soon's eyes go wide as he drops the bombshell that Do-yoon is actually planning to wage a one-man war against the Daejeong Syndicate. Instead of hitting the panic button, the boss just calmly points a finger to redirect the conversation across the room. The reality of the situation hangs heavy over the room like a bad hangover. Dong-seon defends letting his guy walk, explaining that Do-yoon used his promise to deliver Choi's head as leverage, backing him completely into a corner. The bearded boss slowly nods, finally piecing together exactly how their top earner managed to slip the leash. Dong-seon stares dead ahead, making it crystal clear he understands the massive train wreck heading their way. He brings up the crucial detail that the adopted son is now tangled up in this mess as well. The boss grits his teeth, realizing the collateral damage is stacking up faster than a botched GTA heist. Standing with his heavily tattooed arms behind his back, Dong-seon asks if their carefully crafted master plan is getting thrown out the window. Refusing to let one rogue agent ruin his day, the boss slams his massive fist onto the desk and insists they are strictly sticking to the script. He declares that since their first target is already out of the picture, they just need to speedrun the rest of the operation to stay ahead of the chaos. Out in the city, our rogue one-man army trudges up a dark stairwell, letting out an exhausted sigh like he just realized he forgot to save his game before a boss fight. The red-eyed kid kicks things off by hyping up his target, calling him a genuinely cool person. The older bearded dude stares in stunned silence as the kid announces his ultimate master plan is to put his father right at the very top of the food chain. Flashing a cocky smirk, the kid states that making his dad number one is his official next objective. The older guy scoffs and hits him with a weird idiom, asking if the kid actually thinks he can blow his nose without using his hands. Without missing a beat, the kid cheerfully admits that he obviously doesn't have that kind of telekinesis. The older man's eyes practically bulge out of his skull as the kid drops the absolute nuke that the bearded guy is officially his new father starting today. With a totally straight face, our boy tilts his head and asks if he's somehow misread the situation. Letting out a heavy sigh, the older man calls him a punk and explains that you can't just forcefully draft someone into parenthood like it's a fantasy football roster. He gets deadly serious, preaching that a child becomes your entire world, and no matter how much you grind and sweat for them, it never feels like enough. The kid's smug expression instantly flatlines into a deadpan stare as the older man points out that his actual parents probably felt the exact same way about him. The older man asks if the kid is seriously okay with throwing his old life away like a used gift card. Our boy doesn't even blink, brushing off the concern and officially declaring his intention to rebrand himself as Kim Do-yoon. He locks his glowing red eyes on the man, casually dropping a hint that the Gunilpa office is about to level up just by having him around. The older man trails off, completely stunned, locked by the kid's unshakable confidence. Realizing he's losing this staring contest, he sighs and admits he's heard enough. He slaps a heavy hand on the kid's head with a smirk, agreeing to the wildest verbal adoption contract in history. He clarifies that while he isn't sold on the gangster lifestyle, he's fully committing to the dad role. The kid silently admits he wouldn't have had a single counter-argument if the man had just told him to kick rocks. Later that night, the newly minted Do-yoon stands frozen outside a residential gate, stressing over how to explain his sudden change in family tree. Before he can even draft a decent excuse, a girl bursts through the doors like an enraged raid boss, demanding to know exactly what he's whispering about. He flinches back in pure panic, stammering out her name like a teenager caught sneaking back into the house past curfew. A girl in a red hoodie rolls up with her arms crossed, straight up interrogating our guy about demanding Mr. Kim Moo-won adopt him down at the Gunilpa office. He starts sweating bullets, asking if she was eavesdropping on the whole conversation. She stares him down in total silence. Finally, she asks if his little dad hunting side quest actually went the way he wanted. Scratching the back of his neck like he just failed a stealth check, he sheepishly admits that it did. She turns her back to head inside, telling him that's a relief because failing the tutorial stage of something you actually want to do completely kills the vibe. Without missing a beat, she orders him to get inside and eat. Our boy looks stunned that he isn't getting completely chewed out, while she points out he probably hasn't even had dinner yet. Snapping out of his daze, He mumbles a quick thank you and walks through the gate. The two of them duck into the cozy little brick house for the night. Do-yoon finds himself in the middle of the world's most tense living room setup, sitting on a folding chair while 5 intimidating guys stare him down like he just logged into the wrong Discord voice channel. One of the clean-cut lackeys breaks the silence, complaining that having Do-yoon in the room is making everyone incredibly uncomfortable. The scruffy man on the couch, who clearly runs this crew, waves off the complaint and tells his guys they just need to suck it up and get used to the kid's presence. He locks his eyes onto Do-yoon and double-checks that the kid actually cleaned up his mess outside. Do-yoon casually confirms he took care of it, pointing out that the only witness was some guy named A-ung who already knew the entire situation anyway. Satisfied with that answer, the boss rests his chin on his hand and demands to know the real reason Do-yoon begged to join their ranks. Do-yoon doesn't miss a beat, stating matter-of-factly that joining them was mathematically the fastest route to achieving his goal. He starts explaining his grand master plan, but whatever comes out of his mouth is pure censored gibberish, as if his actual strategy violates Twitch terms of service. The boss closes his eyes and takes a long, agonizing second to process this nonsense. Dropping his casual posture, he leans in and completely shoots the idea down, letting Do-yoon know that whatever unholy scheme he just pitched is not happening under his roof. The boss leans over the table, explaining that for any major operation, safety has to be the top priority. He stares Do-yoon down, making it crystal clear that if his master plan doesn't guarantee all 6 of them survive the lobby, he needs to scrap it and follow orders. The boss insists they have zero reason to speedrun this, preferring to methodically clear out Gunchang Dong first. One of the slick-haired subordinates immediately falls in line, confirming he understands the slow and steady strategy. But the universe clearly hates their pacing, because the front door is violently kicked wide open. The crew instantly snaps into a defensive formation, with a guy in a green jacket yanking Do-yoon backward to safety as an unfamiliar voice asks if they found the right spot. A squad of rival goons casually strolls in, led by a smug guy wielding a metal bat who announces they've arrived at the Gunilpa office. The point man pauses with his hand on the knob, double-checking to make absolutely sure they didn't just commit a home invasion on the wrong apartment. After a quick visual check, the bat wielder confidently confirms they have indeed hit the Gunilpa jackpot. With the address verified, one of the frontline bruisers completely sends it, rushing the room to officially kick off the turf war. A gray-haired man blasts through the entrance like he is speedrunning a home invasion. He curses out the entire room, his eye glowing crimson with enough rage to power a small city. The gang members freeze up, looking like they just realized they forgot to save their game before a boss fight. Before anyone can even blink, the intruder launches a brutal high kick right into a thug's skull, sending a mist of blood into the air. Total chaos breaks out in the warehouse as the attacker sends bodies flying while another goon rushes in with a baseball bat. The guy with the bat thinks he has a solid opening, but our red-eyed guest weaves under the swing with flawless Matrix-level evasion. He instantly punishes the whiffed attack by planting a devastating elbow straight into the batter's jaw. Not even taking a breather, he grabs the next poor sap and delivers a vicious knee to the face, turning the guy's nose into modern art. He sticks the landing perfectly, looking absolutely furious and ready to hand out more free concussions. The last standing thug realizes he is the only one left in the lobby and starts sweating bullets, completely paralyzed by the one-man massacre unfolding in front of him. The gray-haired menace lands a brutal right hook squarely on the last standing thug's jaw. Before the poor guy can even process the concussion, the red-eyed attacker sweeps his legs like he's spamming the sweep kick in Mortal Kombat, sending him crashing onto the tiles. Do-yoon and his associate watch the one-sided beatdown in complete shock, quickly realizing they brought a business plan to a street fight. Scrambling backward on his hands and knees, the battered goon begs for a timeout. The bearded boss finally decides he's seen enough free entertainment and orders Taeju to stand down. Taeju freezes with his fist cocked back, looking genuinely disappointed that he doesn't get to finish the combo. He respectfully acknowledges the command, his glowing red eye locked onto his target. Stepping up to the plate, the boss casually brushes off the defeated gang as completely underwhelming. Do-yoon cuts straight to the chase, demanding to know why the Gunilpa faction decided to crash their building today. Sweating out of his mind on the floor, the terrified lackey interrupts the interrogation, blurting out that his crew saw the exact same thing. The boss listens deadpan as one of the lackeys reports seeing Choi Daeop getting completely dismantled. Do-yoon turns to the battered crew, asking if they marched all the way here to try and pull off some half-baked revenge plot. The bruised thug waves his hands in an absolute panic, swearing that isn't the case. Instead of throwing hands, He bends entirely in half and desperately begs Do Yoon's crew to recruit them. The rest of his small time squad joins the 90-degree bow, offering an unconditional surrender like they just lost a deeply embarrassing match of civilization VI. Do Yoon repeats the phrase, staring at the thugs like they just tried to pay for a premium steak dinner with Monopoly money. Taeju steps up to break down the actual macro strategy, explaining that the Gunilpa faction's opening move is seizing control of the entire Guncheong-dong district. He realizes the second district is basically free real estate that will fall into their laps automatically, making Choi Daeop the optimal target for an ambush. Do Yoon is skeptical of the math here, asking if beating up a guy who was already scheduled to return to the Daejeong headquarters would honestly make the rival syndicate forfeit their turf peacefully. Taeju immediately shuts that naive hope down, confirming that Daejeong will absolutely never hand over the territory without a massive turf war. Do Yoon narrows his eyes, questioning why Daejeong would just hand over their territory without a fight. He breaks down the local geography, explaining that the district is basically the Baltic Avenue of their criminal underworld, sandwiched between massive syndicates but possessing absolutely zero economic value. Taeju chimes in, clarifying that Daejeong only deployed their heavy hitter, Choi Daeop, as a temporary flex to keep the rival Hokjeong gang in check while everyone else spectated. He points out that keeping a max-level unit stationed in a dead zone forever is terrible resource management, meaning the second Choi gets recalled, the surrounding syndicates will drop all their aggro on District 2. Do Yoon casually cracks his wrist, noting that this incoming power vacuum leaves the leftover Gunilpa thugs backed into a corner with only one viable survival strategy. One of the thugs solemnly nods, realizing their only options are to bend the knee or face a total server wipe. Do Yoon finally reveals his galaxy brain play, admitting he only beat down Choi in the first place to give these scattered mobsters a convenient excuse to submit to his crew. He asked the room to imagine the sheer psychological damage inflicted on the grunts, who had to watch their supposedly untouchable boss get folded like a cheap plastic table at a Buffalo Bills tailgate. Leaning forward with absolute confidence, Do Yoon declares that drafting the remaining Gunilpa faction into their ranks is a guaranteed lock. Flashing a dangerous smile, he outlines his final phase to simply scoop up the terrified stragglers and officially absorb the entire district in a hostile takeover. Do Yoon lays out his flawless strategy to the room, bragging that if his calculations are correct, they've already won the first round against Gunilpa with 0 casualties. Taeju just stares at him like he's trying to decipher the patch notes for a game he doesn't play, wondering what on earth is going through his boss's head. Right on cue, a red-eyed subordinate strolls into the room, announcing his perfect timing. Do Yoon glances back over his shoulder to size up the interruption. His gaze sharpens as he processes the absolute headache this new update brings. Turns out, a whole squad of rival thugs is currently folded over at a crisp 90-degree angle, desperately begging for their lives and promising total obedience to their new overlords. Do Yoon aggressively scratches his head, looking like a tired retail manager dealing with a sudden busload of rowdy customers. Taeju steps up, asking his team leader how they should handle this sudden influx of desperate goons. Do Yoon points out that since the enemy literally pulled up to their turf begging for mercy, their hands are basically tied. He officially agrees to take the stragglers in, but immediately drops a heavy condition on the deal to keep them on their toes. Do Yoon lays down the law, ordering his new recruits to stay put in Guncheong-dong and draft a solid roadmap for their future. He makes it crystal clear that if they hand him some half-baked group project, their little alliance is instantly terminated. The 4 ex-rivals fold like lawn chairs, bowing at a perfect 90 degrees while screaming their gratitude. Do Yoon singles out one particularly bruised lackey, officially promoting him to middle management for the Gunilpa remnants and instructing him to report directly to Sangjae from now on. The newly appointed manager practically gives himself whiplash, bowing, sweating bullets as he screams that he won't let his new boss down. He accepts the gig with the desperate energy of a guy who knows failing his probation period means an actual trip to the ER. Exhausted by the mafia theatrics, Do Yoon lets out a heavy sigh and waves them out of the room. The battered remnants scramble toward the exit, bowing the entire way out like they are backing away from a Dark Souls boss. The metal door finally clicks shut, locking in the new hierarchy. With the rivals gone, Do Yoon is left standing in the quiet office with his own loyal inner circle. He turns to Doojin, telling his subordinate to hang tight and endure the messy transition for a little while longer. Doojin completely brushes off the concern, promising to babysit the new recruits and personally guarantee they do not try any funny business behind their backs. Do Yoon glances over his shoulder, noting that since things have reached this point, he is taking full control of the turf. He flashes a smug smile and declares that his master plan is coming together perfectly, meaning he is officially muting the complaint box. One of the newly acquired bearded subordinates clicks his tongue, looking like a retail worker who just got told he is working a double shift on Black Friday. Beside him, another guy just stares off into the distance, swallowing his pride and accepting their new management. The slick-haired lieutenant throws up a reluctant thumbs up, signaling that the entire crew is falling in line. A dark-haired guy finally cuts through the tension, telling the rest of the room to just admit they got completely outplayed. Catching the heavy vibe, Do-yoon turns his back and announces he is going to take the hint and make his exit. He pushes the door open and glances back with a smirk, casually mentioning that he has some preparations to handle for his next move. Meanwhile, a bulky enforcer marches down a sleek, ridiculously long corporate hallway. He lets out a massive sigh of relief, his face drenched in sweat like he just barely survived a 5-star wanted level in GTA. Choi Dae-op raps on a heavy wooden door to announce himself to the director. He drops into a strict 90-degree bow, offering his respects like an NPC reporting back to the local quest giver. He explains that he has a high-priority report to deliver first, and the director casually acknowledges his hard work from the shadows of his massive desk. The boss asks what kind of intel is so spicy it gets to skip the standard corporate pleasantries. Choi keeps his head bowed, revealing that trouble is brewing over in Guncheong-dong. He locks in a dead serious glare, warning his boss that Kim Moo-won is officially up to something and preparing to strike. Meanwhile, our boy Do-yoon is already slipping away down a barren corridor, deciding to make a quiet exit before anyone asks him any hard questions. He throws a quick glance over his shoulder, mentioning that he has a ton of prep work to handle before the real chaos kicks off. The second he hits the safety of a dark alleyway, he lets out a heavy breath. His untouchable mob boss facade drops completely as he admits to himself that he was sweating bullets that entire time. Do-yoon marches up the stairwell, eager to clear out of the area. He stops in his tracks when he spots a group of men hauling a beaten-up guy, firmly telling them to hold on a second. The goons turn around looking like they just got caught skipping the tutorial level, confused about what the problem is now. Keeping his head low, Do-yoon casually mentions that he completely forgot to pass on his message to them. The thugs immediately groan, recognizing him as the local crazy kid, and start complaining about his total lack of respect for adults. They figure he's getting way too cocky just because he managed to catch them off guard earlier. Do-yoon flashes a cold smirk and calls them out for acting like typical low-level mob spawns. This entirely shatters one thug's fragile ego, and he yells that Do-yoon isn't even part of the Gunilpa gang. He demands to know if this brat really thinks he can just run his mouth without facing consequences from the grown-ups. Staring right through the guy, Do-yoon dares him to actually try and do something about it. He hits them with the ultimate disrespect, double-checking to make sure they aren't letting their guard down this time around. Completely losing his mind over the attitude, the thug screams about kids these days and throws a wild haymaker right at Do-yoon's face. The thug throws a massive haymaker, but Do-yoon slips right past it with the reaction time of a Smash Bros. Pro. He instantly counters with a blinding strike to the guy's face, splattering blood, and immediately retiring him from the fight. The thug drops to the concrete like a sack of bricks, leaving the rest of the crew completely baffled about who just crashed their party. Do-yoon casually shakes out his wrists, asking if they already swapped their guys out, or if they just commit so many crimes they can't remember every face. Locking in with a deadly glare, he demands to know how they could possibly forget him. One of the thugs starts sweating bullets, stammering that Do-yoon actually does look kind of familiar. The rusty gears in his head finally turn as he mentally traces things back to Guncheong-dong. He realizes this is the exact same kid who kept spawning in to ruin their operations at the absolute worst times. Do-yoon flashes a dark smile, satisfied that the goon's short-term memory has finally finished downloading. Pure panic sets in as the thug worries about how Do-yoon ended up in Gunilpa. Suddenly realizing this must be the exact reason Choi Dae-op stepped in to handle things personally. The main thug tightens his fist, yelling that Do-yoon is just a brat who stuck his nose into secrets he shouldn't have. He charges forward like a bronze rank player pushing a terrible lane phase. Screaming at the top of his lungs, he loudly declares that Do-yoon's free trial of life has officially expired. He throws a completely telegraphed haymaker, but Do-yoon casually steps out of the strike zone. Without missing a beat, Do-yoon punishes the whiff with a devastating backhand straight to the guy's jaw. The impact turns the thug's face into a crumpled mess as he chokes out a pathetic groan. Before gravity can even pull the guy down, Do-yoon unleashes a brutal high kick that unceremoniously launches him backward. The thug bounces hard off the concrete as Do-yoon flips the script, calmly stating that the only person whose life is getting cancelled tonight is him. He casually raises his sneaker to deliver the final blow. With a sickening crunch, Do-yoon stomps down on the guy's leg, leaving the final remaining bald henchman chewing his nails in absolute terror. Do-yoon notes that this guy is the only original street thug left from before Choi Dae-yeop took over District 2. He casually strolls toward the survivors, admitting he doesn't recognize anybody else in their little crew. The terrified henchman starts sweating like he just accidentally shared his Discord history, frantically explaining that the crumpled meat pretzel on the ground handled all of Choi's behind the scenes dirty work. Do-yoon stares him down and points out that regardless of their excuses, they are all still just common thugs actively defying Kim Moo-won's orders. He makes it crystal clear that this brutal beatdown is a warning against underestimating the Gunilpa faction, ordering them to clean up their act and cut off the rotten branches. His gaze darkens as he declares that the Gunilpa will no longer tolerate bottom-feeding lowlifes in their ranks. The henchman nods so fast he nearly gives himself whiplash, promising to tie up all loose ends and swearing that Do-yoon has nothing to worry about. Do-yoon grabs the guy by the shoulder with a terrifyingly friendly grip, expressing relief that at least someone in this alley has a functioning brain cell. Flashing a predatory smile, he adds that he still doesn't trust thugs, advising the panicked goon to stay on his toes until the bitter end. With his message delivered, Do-yoon turns his back and walks off into the shadows, leaving a trail of bloody footprints while the survivors haul their shattered boss away. The leftover thugs sweat bullets as they haul their battered boss away, muttering that the Gunilpa faction has some seriously terrifying hitters. A bald lackey barks at him to scrub the scene spotless before anyone catches wind of the mess. Dragging the bloody dead weight through the alley, the main thug decides they need to immediately cut ties with anyone linked to Choi Dae-yeop in the entire district. His eyes bug out as the paranoia kicks in, realizing Do-yoon knows all about Choi's off-the-book side quest that he hid from the top brass. He starts spiraling, wondering if this guy orchestrated the whole beatdown from the start like some 5D chess grandmaster. The panic sets in deep as he theorizes their attacker might be gearing up for a much larger operation. Meanwhile, Do-yoon casually takes a stroll up some local stairs, reflecting on how Choi Dae-yeop completely played the District 2 scumbags who trafficked orphans 10 years ago. He figured one of those leftover goons was at the original kidnapping site, so he dropped by to deliver a hands-on warning just in case they were still acting as Choi's puppets. He calculates that if this little intimidation tactic sticks, sweeping the trash out of District 2 is going to be a total speedrun. Reaching the top of the steps, he locks his sights onto his next target, Guncheong District 3. He knows his crew needs to establish total dominance over the whole area quickly, so they can safely advance to whatever comes next. Casting a long shadow against the nearby wall, he is sure his dad and the rest of the family are on the exact same wavelength. Do-yoon heads up the steps to his place, probably hoping for a quiet night after taking out the trash in District 2. Instead, he is greeted by a guy rocking a heavy layer of medical tape on his nose, who immediately mocks Do-yoon for being such a broke beggar that tracking his address was a complete nightmare. Do-yoon just glares back, looking like he is 1 second away from skipping this unskippable cutscene. The bandaged loudmouth is Hwang Sung-hyuk, the classic Nepo, baby son of a director from the massive Daekyung syndicate. Hwang asks if Do-yoon is the one responsible for taking down his uncle Choi Dae-yeop. He stomps right up to Do-yoon's doorstep, puffing out his chest to look as intimidating as possible for a guy who clearly already got his face caved in. Hwang complains about how far he had to crawl into the slums just to find him, blaming Do-yoon for officially bringing his glory days to a screeching halt. He looks down his ruined nose at Do-yoon, tossing out a random insult about his intense stare. Leaning in so close they are practically sharing breath, Hwang vows to return the favor by making Do-yoon's life a living hell, aggressively spelling out the threat just in case our boy is too stupid to get the memo. Flashing the smile of a completely unhinged Arkham inmate, Hwang promises that the entire Daekyung syndicate is coming to stab him in the back, swearing that he will personally be the one to orchestrate his downfall. Do-yoon mutters a curse and turns away from the retreating thug. He grinds his teeth, clearly stressed that he just pulled the aggro of an entire crime syndicate like a low-level player wandering into the wrong boss room. His eyes drop to the concrete, where a torn Guncheong High School envelope is left lying in the dirt. Panic immediately sets in as he wonders if Ah-yeon was watching the whole back alley mafia standoff. He clutches his chest and lets out a massive sigh of relief, realizing she probably missed the entire spectacle. Pushing open his creaky metal gate, he finally heads inside for the night. He steps into his courtyard, looking like a guy who desperately needs a 12-hour nap and a witness protection program. Somewhere else, a slick-back mobster asks his associate if their latest disciplinary action went a little too far. He drops a glass jar onto the table to reveal a severed body part floating in clear liquid, arguing that the victim was just drunk when he made his mistake. A bearded gangster leans on his hand next to a soju bottle, completely unfazed by the mafia pickling project. He explains that even though Choi Dae-yeop was recently demoted, he was still a national-level heavyweight, meaning the syndicate had to brutally process him just to tie up loose ends. The mob boss takes a swig from his green bottle, explaining to his subordinate that once Do-yeon was backed into a corner by someone like that, his rage had nowhere else to go but straight toward him. Tapping his lip like a comic book villain plotting his next arc, he confirms that Do-yeon's bully is the son of a Daekyung director. He casually points out that if a kid is an orphan, the guardian is entirely on the hook for his mess. Staring down at his drink, the boss mutters that both he and Choi Dae-yeop are going to have to take responsibility for the fallout. His lackey carefully unpacks the jar containing a severed body part, double-checking if this grotesque little unboxing video is the exact message the team leader wants delivered in his name. With his eyes glowing red, the boss confirms the plan, claiming they need to deal at least this much damage if they want to successfully pull aggro from the big guy. Later that night at a quiet brick house, the domestic peace is about to get completely shattered. Ah-yeon stares at Do-yeon in absolute disbelief, asking if he seriously just suggested testing his combat stats against actual organized gangsters. Our boy doesn't even hesitate, delivering a firm, deadpan nod. Ah-yeon immediately gets right in his face, demanding to know if his brain has completely blue-screened. She frantically reminds him that he already knows exactly how massive organizations like Daekyung operate, wiping people off the map and ruining lives without breaking a sweat. Ah-yeon grips her arm, asking if he somehow caught amnesia about the people they are dealing with. She reminds him that both of their families were completely ruined by these exact same guys. She warns him that trying to pull a solo raid against a massive syndicate is basically a death sentence, no matter how geared up he thinks he is. Do-yeon shoots back that his address is already out there. He stares her down, making it clear that waiting around to get ganked in his own spawn is not an option anymore. He explains that he needs to figure out if he can actually protect someone on his own without relying on a squad to carry him. He wants to test his own limits to see if he is actually built for this. A heavy silence drops over the tiny apartment table as his stubbornness crashes against her logic. Ah-yeon drops her gaze, softly telling him that even with his new confidence, he cannot win a gang war alone. She begs him to at least recruit the Gunilpa guys as backup, or find someone else he can genuinely trust before throwing his life away. Do-yeon stays totally silent, processing her warning like he's running the math on a solo raid in his head. He stands up and brushes her off, claiming this underground showdown is inevitable anyway. Twisting her words, he decides to take her lecture as full permission to carry out his plan. Ah-yeon is completely stunned by this massive leap in logic. Before she can argue, he orders her to pack up and move into his dad's place for safety. She stares blankly at him, slowly realizing he is basically putting her in forced witness protection. Her frustration spikes as she angrily crushes a wad of trash in her hand. Turning away, she mutters under her breath about how ridiculous he sounds trying to play the strict father figure. Outside, heavy raindrops start smacking the pavement like the gritty opening sequence of a Batman movie. A mysterious guy in a suit stands completely still in the downpour, radiating major final boss energy as he watches the neighborhood. The suited stalker's eyes glow in the dark like a newly spawned enemy in a survival horror game. Inside the empty house, Ah-yeon huddles on the floor hugging her knees next to a cardboard box, starring in the world's most depressing unboxing video. The mysterious guy perches on the perimeter wall to get a better look at his target. He notes that she has excellent potential to be crushed, evaluating her misery like a twisted talent scout looking for a draft pick. Miles away, a desk sits piled high with thick printed reports, a flash drive, and an empty ashtray. A stressed older man aggressively taps the paperwork, looking completely exhausted by whatever nightmare he is reading. He sits at the head of a conference table, running a grim strategy meeting with three of his serious-looking subordinates. One of the men speaks up, warning the room that Do-yeon isn't the type of kid to just sit back and follow orders. The guy across from him agrees, admitting he fully expected Do-yeon to cause a scene, but baiting the leftover Gunilpa gang members all the way out to the riverside completely blindsided them. The boss stays totally silent, glaring off to the side as he calculates exactly how massive this headache is about to become. The scruffy boss decides it is time to hit the fast forward button on their operation. His underlings stare back at him, waiting for the catch. He explains that dragging their feet is only going to get them killed. Slamming his hand on the table, he announces they are going to wipe out the gun Cheong-3 area while they wait for a response from their rivals. The crew sits around the bleak conference table like they are planning a heist in GTA Online, absorbing the sudden shift in strategy. His right-hand man asks if rushing things is going to blow up in their faces. The boss gets all philosophical, comparing their current mess to a rolling boulder that will completely crush them if they try to hit the brakes. His crew stays perfectly quiet, realizing they are locked into this chaotic speedrun. Clenching his fist, the boss doubles down, insisting that sprinting through the danger is their only real safety net. After all, they already mailed the rival gang a piece of Choi Dae. Yep, neatly packing his severed finger in a jar like some twisted Amazon Prime delivery. A heavily scarred hand aggressively crushes a small brown paper bag. Choi Dae, yep, a former gang boss turned corporate deputy chief, glares at the package like it just griefed his private Minecraft server. His eye furiously twitches as his anger boils over. Grinding his teeth, he mutters that the sender is a complete lunatic. He squeezes the parcel even tighter, scoffing that this intimidation tactic is a painfully obvious play. Letting his rage take the wheel, he crushes the bag until the fragile contents inside audibly shatter in his palms. He completely loses his cool and fastballs the mangled package against the far wall. The bag splits open upon impact, spilling a shattered ceramic jar and a pile of ash all over the floor. A polished dress shoe steps directly into the mess, disrespectfully crunching the broken debris underfoot. The heavy double doors slam open as someone suddenly barges into the office. Hwang Sung, Hayek stands there looking like he just got caught griefing a Minecraft server, sporting a fresh bandage across his nose. His dad, the director of Daekyung, slams his hands on the desk and demands to know how his own flesh and blood couldn't even hold it down in a rundown slum like Guncheong Dong. Sung Hayek just glares at the floor, silently taking the verbal damage. He tries to stutter out a pathetic defense, but gets cleanly interrupted by a deep voice outside the room announcing himself as Choi Dae. Yep. The kid practically jumps out of his skin as the scarred enforcer pushes open the door. Realizing it isn't a hitman coming to finish the job, Sung Hyuk drops his shoulders and breathes a massive sigh of relief, clearly thrilled to have the aggro pulled off him. The director snaps his head toward the entrance, barking at Choi for barging into his office uninvited. The massive suit immediately folds into a deep 90-degree bow, apologizing to his boss for the rude intrusion. Realizing his yelling quota for the day is already maxed out, the old man slumps back into his desk chair with a heavy sigh and asks what his underling wants. Keeping his gaze firmly glued to the floorboards, Choi formally requests permission to operate completely solo for the next few days. Dae stays bowed at a perfect 90-degree angle while Sung Hyuk stands perfectly still out of pure fear. The director narrows his eyes from his desk, asking if this sudden request to operate solo has anything to do with a guy named Kim Moo-won. Just hearing the name makes Sung Hyuk start sweating like a Smash Bros player at a deodorant convention. Dae completely ignores the rising tension in the room and calmly confirms that he received a personal invitation. The boss shoots him a harsh side eye, entirely unconvinced by this convenient excuse. He drums his fingers against the desk, calling the whole operation way too suspicious to trust. Tapping out his final verdict, the director announces that he will be the one stepping in to handle this specific target himself. He waves his hand dismissively, ordering Dae to stop getting played and to just focus on his original assignment. Dae dips into another submissive bow, giving a crisp, obedient confirmation that he understands his boss's orders. But the loud grinding of his teeth tells a completely different story, proving he has absolutely zero intention of actually letting this go. The director shuts the door behind his subordinate, finally alone with his plotting. He figures if the target really is Kim Moo-won, he can easily use the guy to steal all the glory for himself down the line. He starts rehearsing his demands for backup, while plotting to keep everyone else out of the operation, treating his job exactly like a player trying to max his way to the top of a ranked leaderboard. A creepy smirk spreads across his face as he decides to hold his horses for just a bit longer. Staring down at his ancient flip phone, he promises himself that his grand entrance will happen right when the timing guarantees maximum main character energy. He pulls up the file for Darum Manpower to start pulling some strings. Meanwhile, out in a rundown neighborhood that screams low-level side quest location, the night is just getting started. A burner phone suddenly goes clattering down a steep flight of concrete stairs. It lands in a pathetic heap of cracked plastic next to some trash, effectively cutting off any tracking the director might try to pull. Dae casually strolls through the empty alleyway, completely off the grid and operating strictly on his own terms. He double-checks a crumpled piece of paper in his hand, quietly noting to himself that he finally reached his destination. Dae strolls down a shady alleyway, keeping his eyes peeled for a specific blue gate. He spots a set of rusted metal doors at the end of the block and stops to inspect the perimeter. He remarks on what a solid hiding spot this is, noting the target is playing a masterclass game of prop hunt in the slums. Stepping through the entrance into a cramped courtyard, he casually strides past the scattered junk toward the main house. Right outside the front door, he overhears a muffled voice from inside assuring someone that they have absolutely nothing to worry about. Inside the dreary room, a beefy guy in a tank top puffs on a cigarette while telling his boss over the phone that all the merchandise has already been relocated. The trafficker promises to pack up his own things as soon as his backup arrives, complaining about some random punk who refused to listen to reason earlier. His phone call gets abruptly cancelled when Yep kicks the sliding door straight off its tracks, admitting he never would have found this ordinary residential hideout on his own. Stepping through the shattered glass with a glowing red eye, our boy roasts the trafficker for living in such a miserable dump despite making a living selling actual human beings. The trafficker just freezes with the phone glued to his ear, processing the sudden home invasion like a lagging NPC. The trafficker glances up from his phone, casually noting that his guest has finally arrived. He complains that the kid should have shown up earlier if he wanted to start trouble, acting like he's leaving a 1-star Yelp review for a hitman's punctuality. Stepping toward the shadowy intruder, the trafficker warmly welcomes him. A creepy grin spreads across his face as he asks if they've crossed paths before, flashing back to his masked days. Yep remains completely unfazed, noting that the guy's ugly mug perfectly matches the intel he got from the Gunilpa gang. He owns in on the fact that the trafficker was expecting him, realizing this rabbit hole goes way deeper than he thought. His mind starts racing, wondering if the mole he planted in the syndicate completely sold him out. Tired of being ignored, the trafficker loses his temper and throws a massive haymaker, screaming that the brat isn't taking him seriously. Our boy effortlessly weaves past the fist like his opponent is playing with stick drift, deducing that he needs to interrogate this guy to find the leak. He easily slips under a whole combo of wild swings, calmly noting that the entire setup felt like a trap from the very beginning. The trafficker throws a heavy hook, sarcastically thanking the kid for delivering himself to the slaughter. He flashes an arrogant smirk, boasting that this exact trap is what he was waiting for all along. He unleashes a rapid-fire combo asking if Yep agrees with his setup. Yep easily slips under the wild swings, treating the trafficker like a button-mashing bronze rank in a Street Fighter lobby. He closes the gap and delivers a crushing counter, punch right into the guy's ribcage. The trafficker's eyes bulge out of his skull as the wind is instantly knocked out of his lungs. The sheer force of the strike blasts him completely backward. He clutches his chest, cursing under his breath as he struggles to keep his legs from giving out. His bare feet skid across the floorboards as he tries to find his balance. He crashes into the kitchen counter, knocking over a couple of liquor bottles while panicking over how badly he miscalculated this matchup. The trafficker snatches a heavy glass bottle off the counter, deciding it's time to upgrade his weapon loadout. He chucks it straight at Yep, screaming that everyone is suddenly losing their minds over ancient history. Yep weaves out of the way like he's in the Matrix, letting the glass shatter uselessly against the wall behind him. The trafficker uses the distraction to close the gap, driving his shoulder into Yep and tackling him to the floor. Pinning our boy down, the musclehead winds up a heavy hook and mocks him for thinking a couple of lucky punches makes him a real threat. He lands a brutal strike right across Yep's jaw, yelling that this underground business isn't a playground for worthless punks. Following up with another nasty blow, he taunts Yep for being a soft kid who isn't even ready to get his own hands bloody. The trafficker raises his fist for a massive finishing blow, threatening to chop Yep into tiny pieces and sell him for spare parts just like his buddy. He slams his hand down with everything he has, but ends up punching pure floorboards as Yep slips the strike at the very last millisecond. Before the trafficker can recenter his aggro, Yep locks down his wrist in a dead stop grip, leaving the guy cursing as he realizes his turn is officially over. Yep locks onto the trafficker's jacket with a death grip. He uses the heavy hitter's own momentum against him, tossing the massive dude over his shoulder like a lightweight sack of potatoes. The trafficker slams into the floor so hard his brain probably restarts like a bad Wi-Fi router. Before the guy can even process gravity, Yep mounts him and wins up a massive strike. He drops a fist straight into the trafficker's face, turning the floorboards into a personal impact crater. With his target effectively flattened, Yep pauses the beatdown to announce he has a quick inquiry before they get down to business. Standing over his newly installed floor mat, our boy asks where this thug actually ranks on the syndicate tier list, wondering if he even measures up to the head office boss's toenails. The trafficker grits his bloody teeth, seething with rage that this kid is treating him like a worthless tutorial mob. Flashing a dark smile, Yep warns the guy not to overestimate his own stats. He casually steps forward, radiating final boss energy as he prepares to ask one last question. Yep demands to know where the trafficker sent the missing kids. The battered thug actually has the nerve to mock him, asking if he expects to play the hero and claiming his soft attitude won't get him anywhere. Yep casually picks up a broken glass bottle by the neck like he's locking in his melee weapon for a boss fight. He repeats the word attitude under his breath, clearly taking that little critique personally. Without a second of hesitation, he winds up his arm and brings the jagged glass swinging down. He plunges the makeshift weapon straight into the guy's groin, making the trafficker scream like he just stepped on a Lego barefoot in the dark. Looking down with absolute dead eyes, our boy casually asks if this level of resolve is hardcore enough for him. The trafficker writhes on the floor clutching his bleeding wound, but Yep just stands over him and orders him to answer the question. To jog the guy's memory, Yep stomps his sneaker directly onto the fresh stab wound, sending blood flying across the floor. He stares down at his whimpering victim, coldly repeating his demand for an answer. Yep casually drops the name of the Daekyung branch, letting the trafficker know he already has a piece of the puzzle. The trafficker glares back through his broken teeth and asks if our boy actually thinks he can make it there alive. Not in the mood for riddles, Yep treats the guy's open groin wound like a DDR dance pad and stomps on it again, demanding a straight answer. He stares down at the bleeding criminal with dead eyes, telling him to stop stalling and speak up. Yep repeats the branch name, making it crystal clear he isn't leaving until he gets the exact coordinates. But the trafficker's brain has clearly screened from the pain, and he spits back the exact same taunt about Yep never surviving the trip. Instead of tapping out, the trafficker snaps, lunging forward with a scream to grab Yep by the head. He locks his arms around Yep's neck, dragging him into a sudden grapple. Putting his back into it, the trafficker aggressively slams Yep down. He screams out in a desperate frenzy, trying to take his interrogator down with him. The trafficker tries to press his advantage, shoving Yep backward across the floor like he's going for a high school wrestling takedown. But Yep just casually hooks a hand around the back of the guy's skull. He immediately serves up a brutal Glasgow kiss, smashing his own forehead right into the trafficker's face. The impact basically resets the guy's Windows registry, sending his eyes rolling into the back of his head as blood explodes from his nose. Gwang-sik stumbles back, suddenly leaking fluids like a busted radiator. Yep slowly steps toward the hunched-over trafficker, dropping the formalities and calling Gwang-sik by his actual name. Staring him down with glowing eyes, Yep asks if his recent brain damage is preventing him from understanding the situation, reminding him they aren't back in their old Guncheon neighborhood anymore. He snatches Gwang-sik by the collar of his hoodie, making it crystal clear that there are no older gang brothers around to save his skin this time. Yanking the bleeding trafficker right up to his face, Yep brings up the only reason Gwang-sik managed to survive their last encounter. With a dead-eyed stare, he promises the trafficker that walking away that day had nothing to do with him hesitating to finish the job. Yep tightens his grip on the trafficker's collar, warning him that he is fully prepared to cross whatever lines he has to. He stares Gwang-sik down, daring the guy to call his bluff. The trafficker chokes on his own blood, looking like a low-level NPC who just aggroed a max-level boss. Yep shoves him away. Gwang-sik hunches over, hacking up a lung while his interrogator looms in the shadows behind him. He calmly asks the bleeding guy on the floor if he actually wants to keep breathing. Flashing a sharp grin, Yep demands an upfront payment for sparing his life. He grabs Gwang-sik by the hair, explaining that his existence now belongs to him, leaving the trafficker stammering in complete confusion. Yep sighs, genuinely baffled at how someone with a single-digit IQ managed to survive the criminal underworld for this long. Leaning in close, he clarifies that Gwang-sik needs to hand over a piece of information so compromising that it guarantees a fatal beatdown if he ever tries to backstab him. Gwang-sik starts stammering out a denial, his eye twitching like he just hit a massive lag spike right in the middle of a boss fight. Yep steps closer, asking if this guy is seriously more terrified of an absentee boss than the very real threat standing right over him. Coughing up blood, Gwang-sik desperately begs him to just lay out exactly what he wants to know so they can skip the torture phase. Yep asks about the kidnapped kids and Gwang-sik immediately squeals that the good-looking boys get auctioned off to high-end establishments. Yep processes this horrific human trafficking tidbit by planting his shoe squarely into Gwang-sik's ribs. Holding his hands up in a panic, Guang-sik nervously defends the operation, explaining that pretty boys are a rare commodity for their VIP clients. He adds that the less desirable kids get shipped off to a Daejeong branch, dropping a name that actually manages to stun Dae. Yep. Realizing he just leaked top-tier company secrets, Guang-sik flashes a full bloody smile and curses his terrible RNG in life. Before he can say another word, his own massive subordinate suddenly caves his chest in with a brutal strike, telling him to shut his mouth. The buff goon leans over his bleeding boss, whispering that if he plans on catching a death sentence, he needs to do it solo, instead of dragging the rest of the crew down with him. Dae steps right over the fresh corpse and plants his foot firmly into the subordinate's gut. He stares down with cold, glowing eyes, taking a heavy breath like he just finished soloing a raid boss. He asks the bleeding thug if losing a leg wasn't enough of a warning. Grabbing him by his torn undershirt, Dae casually mentions that the guy was next in line for a beatdown anyway. The subordinate spits up a mouthful of blood and asks what Dae is actually going to do about it. He points out the massive flaw in the interrogation plan, screaming that with Guang-sik dead, he is the only one left who knows anything. Trying to act tough, the thug flashes a bloody smirk and asks if he looks like some random NPC pushover. He grabs Dae's wrist, ranting about how dealing with some rookie makes him look weak, and demands respect for surviving the criminal underworld this long. Dae's face drops into pure shadow, a single red eye glowing like a final phase warning indicator. The thug keeps pushing his luck, asking if Dae is going to hit him or kill him, and immediately gets his answer in the form of a brutal skull-cracking headbutt. The subordinate screams in agony as blood sprays across the room. Dae answers by delivering a headbutt so hard it probably resets the guy's skill tree. The trafficker begs him to stop while coughing up half his dental records. Dae just stares back with glowing dead eyes and wins up for round 2. Another heavy impact sends blood splattering all the way up to the ceiling. Pulling back with a fresh coat of red on his forehead, Dae looks completely unfazed by his own handiwork. He leans in dangerously close, getting the terrified thug to frantically blurt out the name Dara Manpower. The guy explains it's a small shadow organization set up in Guncheong, Dong right under Daejeong's nose, swearing through tears that his information ends there. He pleads for his life, but Dae just flashes a bloody slasher movie smile. Keeping his target pinned to the floor, Dae ignores the crying entirely and calmly asks for the location of the high-end establishment where they sold the kidnapped kids. Dae grips the goon's skull like a bowling ball, squeezing until the guy finally coughs up a specific district in Guncheon. The bleeding thug swears up and down that his knowledge stops there. He explains that their job was just a simple delivery quest, dropping off the kids in a suitcase and getting a suitcase full of cash in return. Panicking with blood pouring out of his mouth, the subordinate cries that if his boss finds out he snitched, he'll be permanently banned from the territory. He begs for mercy with the sheer panic of a player who just realized they forgot to quicksave before a boss room. Thinking he actually triggered the good ending, the lackey slams his head onto the floor, promising to serve Dae as his loyal brother for life. Dae just wipes the grime off his arm, coldly pointing out that the kidnapped children used those exact same words to beg for their lives. With pure murder in his eyes, he brings his heel down like a hydraulic press directly onto the back of the snitch's head. He reminds the crushed thug that his victims pleaded for mercy too, making sure this absolute clown understands exactly why his skull is currently getting caved into the concrete. Leaving the trash on the ground, Dae heads over to a rusted rooftop sink. He cranks open the tap to wash the scumbag's blood off his knuckles. Drying off his face with his jacket, he stares out over the glowing city skyline. Looking at the towering buildings hiding the human trafficking ring, he curses the whole organization as filthy bastards before locking in for his next raid. Dae flips open his phone, getting a harsh reminder that his recent skull-crushing rampage has ruffled some serious feathers. A cold sweat breaks out on his face as he realizes the enemy knows exactly what he has been up to. The screen lights up to reveal 19 missed calls and a single text message, looking exactly like the notification screen of a teenager who just missed curfew. He stares at the device, wondering how everything managed to fall apart in the short time he was busy playing interrogator. His face drops into a heavy shadow, leaving only his eyes glowing with the kind of rage usually reserved for a Dark Souls boss phase. He opens the lone message from Han Seong-jae, which delivers the gut punch that Yoon has completely vanished. Wasting zero time, our boy starts sprinting down the empty streets like he's trying to outrun the storm circle in Fortnite. He arrives at the apartment to find a trashed room with overturned boxes and clothes scattered across the floor. He bursts through the doorway, his face twisting with sheer panic as he scans the empty space. Barely able to catch his breath, He remembers a grim warning that he really should have just stayed out of trouble at his father's house. A memory hits him of Yoon staring at the floor, quietly asking if he's starting to have second thoughts. He tries to reassure her, saying that if they can just hold out until they're adults, they might actually get to live a normal life, assuming they don't get scammed like a couple of noobs in a RuneScape trade window. His grip tightens on the door handle as he confesses that he's honestly terrified too. Pushing the door open, he promises he's taking on this whole burden specifically, so she'll never have to be scared again. He tells her not to worry, leaving her looking up at him with tears welling in her eyes. Snapping back to the harsh reality of her empty, trashed apartment, Yep curses himself out for being a complete idiot. His fist clenches so hard his knuckles look ready to snap. Sweat drips down his face as he mentally kicks himself for losing his cool, after swearing he wouldn't let his emotions take over. Right on cue, the sliding door squeaks open, and a man in a blazer casually steps into the room. The man smugly asks if Yep finally decided to show up, and our boy gives a cold confirmation, officially locking in for the boss fight. The blazer guy surveys the wrecked apartment, deducing that Yoon didn't just log off for the night, and that a serious struggle actually went down. Yep is sweating bullets, mentioning that local witnesses spotted a squad of sketchy men prowling the area. He tries to piece the puzzle together, wondering why the enemy aggro was pulled onto Yoon instead of directly targeting them. Half swallowed by the hallway shadows, Yep declares their next main quest is hunting down a group called Darum Manpower. The blazer guy is completely thrown off by the name, cracking open a water bottle like he's hydrating for an unskippable cutscene. He steps fully into the room and casually holds the drink out to his highly stressed partner. Looking totally baffled, the guy asks how some random manpower company connects to the missing girl. He hands the bottle over, insisting that Yoon and this shady organization have zero crossover in the lore. Yep drops his gaze, letting the heavy realization sink in. Gripping the water bottle like a lifeline, his eyes go completely wide as he confesses that the target was never Yoon, but himself. The guy in the blazer questions if the local thugs are actually claiming this is some secret black ops group Choi Dae-op set up to dodge surveillance. He points out that trusting a bunch of street-level randoms is a massive stretch, while Do-yoon aggressively chugs a bottle of water like he just finished a marathon. Stepping closer, his partner finally checks if Do-yoon caught any stray hits during the scuffle, admitting he was way too panicked about Yoon to ask sooner. Do-yoon brushes off the concern with a dead-eyed stare, declaring the guys he fought were complete NPC fodder. He pivots straight back to business, making it crystal clear that tracking down Yoon is the only quest objective right now, which gets him a quick nod of agreement. Connecting the dots, Do-yoon explains that a director's son recently paid them a visit, meaning his guardian, Choi Dae-op, definitely rubber stamped the whole operation. His partner rubs his chin, realizing the logic is actually bulletproof. He silently notes that Do-yoon usually keeps his cool, but goes full John Wick on a revenge tour the second Yoon is involved. Since they have zero other intel to work with, he decides the theory is solid enough and sitting around isn't an option. He claps a heavy hand on Do-yoon's shoulder, deciding their best play is to alert the team leader so they can immediately spawn in a rescue squad. Do-yoon asks his partner who exactly is out there tracking down these suspects. The partner checks his flip phone like it's a relic from the Mesozoic era, and names Bang Taeju as their guy on the ground. He immediately dials up their team leader to report that Do-yoon has safely returned from his little solo mission without a single scratch on him. Do-yoon presses him for any updates on Yoon's whereabouts, prompting the partner to ask the boss if they actually managed to locate her. Riding in the back of a speeding taxi, the team leader confirms he just got a solid tip from Taeju about a group flashing the name Darum. He zeroes in on their target, explaining that the only outfit waving that banner around these parts is Darum Manpower out on the edge of the district. The boss claims jurisdiction over the rescue op, telling his subordinate to stand down and let him handle the heavy lifting. He orders his guy to babysit Do-yoon and keep him on a tight leash so the kid doesn't pull a Leroy Jenkins and rush into enemy territory blind. Snapping his retro phone shut, the boss prepares for a long overdue confrontation. He mutters that the Darum crew has been getting on his nerves for a while now, and kidnapping a civilian is the exact excuse he needed to finally clean house. His taxi screeches to a halt outside a rundown industrial park, setting the stage for a midnight beatdown. The underling hits his boss with a crisp, 90-degree bow the second he steps out of the car. The bearded team leader immediately asks what is up with the sudden NPC greeting. He glances past his subordinate to take in the local scenery. Two guys in full construction gear are currently taking a dirt nap on the pavement, looking like they just failed a massive quick-time event. Wiping the sweat off his neck, The leader listens as his subordinate explains that he preemptively dropped the dudes since they were the only ones leaving the building. The two of them stand in the empty industrial park and watch a random taxi speed off into the night. Giving his guy a solid smack on the shoulder, the leader demands to know what intel he actually squeezed out of them about Yoon's location, only to hear that the knocked-out goons were clueless grunts who went rogue without even knowing their employer's name. The boss scowls, completely rejecting the rogue theory and insisting that someone higher up definitely pulled the strings. He tells his partner to move out as they stroll straight up to the brightly lit front doors of Durham Manpower. Flashing a dangerous grin, the subordinate agrees, adding that it is time to find out if their favorite earless bastard was the one orchestrating the whole kidnapping. Inside a dingy warehouse, Yoon sits tied to a chair with duct tape over her mouth while her captor asks if she is finally done throwing a tantrum. The guy stepping out of the shadows looks like the final boss of a sketchy back alley MLM scheme, grinning like a maniac as he asks if she is just naive or entirely stupid. She shoots him a death glare, prompting him to wonder if she just has a ridiculous amount of nerve. Leaning right into her personal space, he notes her defiance and asks if she secretly thinks she has some kind of ace up her sleeve. He grabs a fistful of her hair, casually pondering what they are supposed to do with her while shattering her hopes by stating nothing will go according to her little escape plan. Flashing a tongue that belongs on a resident evil mutant, he admits that if he had his way he would devour her on the spot, complaining that holding back is driving him out of his mind. He paces around her chair like a vulture, commenting that they haven't caught a decent-looking victim in ages. He violently yanks her head back, throwing a massive pity party for himself, because he isn't even allowed a tiny taste of his own captive, while Yoon groans through her gag. His eye flashes red in the dark as he catches onto her strategy, asking if she actually thinks stalling for time is going to save her. Checking his gold watch like he is about to miss a tea time, he tells her to give up entirely because his crew prides themselves on being clean, efficient professionals. The smirking captor checks his imaginary watch, noting that it's getting pretty late for a hostage situation. He stands right behind Yoon's chair and starts ominously counting up from 1. He hits 2, dragging out the suspense like he's about to reveal the winner of Survivor. A single tear drops from Yoon's eye just as he finally reaches 3. Right on cue, he predicts the warehouse door is about to swing open. One of his goons immediately bursts in to announce that the getaway car is waiting outside. The boss readies a black cloth sack, smugly asking Yoon if that interruption was exactly what she was expecting to hear. He yanks the bag over her head, bragging about his flawless comedic timing. Looking like a Dark Souls boss entering Phase 2, he informs her she is getting shipped straight to Daejeong. Meanwhile, a completely different guy stands outside in the dark, wondering what kind of fresh hell he just walked into. One of the bystanders completely loses his nerve, panicking over why the specific crew is suddenly crashing the party. The gate swings open to reveal a 4-man hit squad built like a late-game Yakuza boss encounter, complete with a designated pipe wielder. The guy with the pipe casually mentions they were given strict orders to keep this exact location on total lockdown. Flashing the kind of deranged smile that screams he enjoys his job way too much, he politely suggests the bystanders evacuate the premises immediately. Before the situation can escalate, heavy footsteps echo as a door creaks open. 2 incredibly rugged older guys stroll straight into the building, looking like they haven't slept since 2014. The bearded one steps into a back room where 4 thugs are having a casual drinking session, observing that the inside is surprisingly spotless compared to the absolute disaster zone outside. One of the thugs smirks and complains that the warehouse is way too massive for just 4 people to occupy. The bearded man completely ignores the interior design critique, his eyes going dark as he demands to know exactly where they are keeping his kid. Taking massive offense to his tone, the thugs instantly snap, grabbing empty liquor bottles and charging forward while screaming at the old men to drop the arrogant act. One of the thugs decides to initiate combat by hurling a heavy green bottle straight at the older man's head while his buddy charges in for backup. The dad doesn't even flinch, staring him down with the deadpan energy of a veteran Elden Ring player watching a tutorial boss wend up an attack. The improvised projectile blitzes right toward his face. Before it can connect, his black-haired companion drops low to the floor, letting the glass shatter harmlessly against the back wall. The thug visibly panics, sweating bullets as he realizes his fastball completely whiffed. Gripping a bottle of his own, the younger guy flashes a cocky grin and warns the dad that with a welcome like that, he has no choice but to tag into the brawl. Dropping into a sprinter's stance, his eyes glow red from the shadows while the dad just casually observes with his hands in his pockets. Winding up his pitch like a major league closer, The younger fighter squares off against a second thug rushing him with a wooden bat. He threads the needle, fast, balling the glass right into the attacker's forehead and exploding it into a bloody mist before the bat can even swing down. The enemy hits the deck instantly, leaving our boy to stick a slick 3-point landing while the dad continues to spectate the carnage like an AFK lobby member. Our guy in the black jacket skips the victory taunt and steps directly over the unconscious body. He drives a heavy right hook into the jaw of the next thug, folding him like a cheap lawn chair. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and another goon scoops up the jagged neck of a broken bottle. He charges in blindly, hoping to score a lucky critical hit. Black jacket ducks under the swinging glass like he's rolling through an Elden Ring boss attack on 0 ping. Slipping perfectly inside the enemy's guard, he wins up a punishing counter. He launches an uppercut so firm it forces a spray of blood from the thug's mouth and practically sends him into low orbit. The guy crashes to the floor, suddenly joining his squad mates in the growing nap pile. The final thug grips a wooden plank, staring at his shoes while trying to process how his entire team just got wiped out in under 15 seconds. Pure panic takes over, and he hoists the wood overhead for a desperate swing as our boy casually closes the gap. The final thug swings his wooden plank for the fences, but the jacket guy ducks under it with perfect iframes. He instantly counters the whiff with a brutal uppercut straight to the chin. The thug's HP hits 0 as he crashes to the floor, spitting out a fountain of blood. A new guy with a beard strolls onto the scene, completely unbothered by the fresh trail of bodies. He points at the unconscious goon and tells his partner to leave him alone. Raising a freshly bloodied fist, the jacket guy asks if he gets a free pass to keep tenderizing his current target. The bearded man casually waves him off, giving him full permission to finish the side quest. He then walks over to the last conscious thug, who is desperately scooting backward across the floor to escape. Crouching down to his level, the bearded guy demands to know where the rest of the crew went, making the terrified goon stutter and play dumb. Staring him down with dead eyes, he forces the thug to confess that another squad took the main job while they were just stuck on guard duty, leading the bearded man to ask if Choi Daeop is the one pulling the strings. The battered thug stammers and sweats bullets, desperately trying to play dumb. The bearded man decides verbal negotiation is off the table and casually scoops up a jagged bottle from the floor. He shoves the broken glass straight into the guy's personal space, demanding to know if he answers to Choi Daeop. Staring down the sharp end of the makeshift weapon, the thug instantly folds and eagerly confirms the name to avoid getting a permanent Joker smile. The bearded guy lets out a heavy sigh, looking completely exhausted by the interrogation process, and asks about a past incident. He wants to know if this crew was the local welcoming committee that greeted them with chokeholds and hammers back when they first moved into the neighborhood. Squatting amidst a sea of unconscious bodies, he presses for an answer, but the thug immediately throws his upper management under the bus. The goon spills their entire organizational chart, explaining that the brutal welcome caught Choi's eye and secured a partnership, but swears he is just a newly hired temp with 0 high-level clearance. The bearded man's eyes narrow like a predator locking onto a target, demanding the exact location of the main squad. The thug's eyes bug out in sheer panic as he realizes his free trial of living is about to expire if he doesn't drop a pin right now. The battered thug spills the beans, stammering that Choi Daeop's squad headed over to Gunchang 1, Dong for a forced eviction, which is basically street slang for making someone disappear. Blood dripping from his chin, he adds that the crew specifically threatened to slice off the target's ear. Having farmed all the necessary intel, the bearded man stands up and turns away from his human punching bag. He calls out to his buddy Taeju over his shoulder. Taeju is already busy casually dragging an unconscious body by the collar, but gets ordered to finish taking out the trash and tag along. Over at the target site, a blonde thug with way too much white in his eyes reminds his crew that the boss wants this area cleared out fast. He smirks, instructing his goons to secure the package and immediately hit the eject button. The eviction squad rushes the building with bats and pipes, charging straight at a handful of defenders holding the front line. The blonde leader grumbles about how annoying it is that they have to catch the target alive instead of just canceling his life subscription right then and there. The defenders brace for impact as a guy in a trench coat calmly tightens his black leather gloves, prepping to style on these low-level NPCs. The blonde thug smirks, completely unaware of the massive, tattooed arm sliding around his neck from behind. His cocky attitude vanishes in a split second as the chokehold tightens, making his eyes roll back like he just disconnected from the server. The rest of the eviction squad hits the panic button, screaming at each other to figure out who just ambushed their leader. The tattooed newcomer carelessly drops the unconscious blonde directly onto the pavement. Taeju stands over the crumpled body, calmly informing the thugs that they are running behind schedule. His suited partner slides on a pair of black leather gloves, suggesting the squad compensate for their tardiness by paying in physical trauma. Refusing to back down, one of the masked goons decides to test his luck and sprints forward to throw hands. He locks onto his target, fully committing all his momentum to the attack. A millisecond later, his pupil shrinks in pure terror as he realizes he just rushed a raid boss with starter gear. Before the goon can even swing, Taeju instantly flattens him face, first into the dirt, casually dropping into his combat stance to welcome the next challenger. One of the remaining goons starts sweating bullets. Realizing the terrifying rumors about this guy are totally true and wondering why management deployed them to this literal boss room, Taeju decides to help him log out, delivering a devastating right hook that knocks the dude's cap right off his head in a fountain of blood. The blue-haired kid can only watch with his jaw on the floor, completely stunned by the sheer speed of the beatdown. Without missing a beat, Taeju closes the distance on the next hoodie, wearing thug in line for an ass whooping. He flashes a merciless death glare that promises nothing but expensive dental bills. Before the guy can even flinch, Taeju caves his face in with a savage cross. The poor henchman drops to the pavement like a glitching NPC, absolutely out cold. The dust finally settles just as a suave guy in a trench coat walks up to the scene. Looking at the unconscious bodies scattered across the yard and questioning why a massive brawl happened at an empty house, he casually adjusts his jacket and runs the math, realizing that if the Darum manpower crew is getting folded like laundry out here, their own team leader must have come up totally empty-handed as well. The blue-haired kid immediately spots the setup, concluding that the entire Darum manpower dispatch was nothing more than an elaborate trap to waste their time. The guy in the trench coat runs the calculations and figures out the other heavy hitters must have split up to cover more ground. Meanwhile, right after the kidnapper gets dealt with, things aren't exactly going according to schedule. A red-haired kid with a busted nose is having a full-blown meltdown because his backup is entirely ghosting him. Turns out this is Hwang Sung-hyuk, the ultimate nepo baby son of a powerful director, and he is screaming at the ceiling like a raging Fortnite kid who just lost his Wi-Fi connection. His beat-up handler tries to inject some logic into the room, explaining that the strike team probably just rolled out and he is way too injured to play secretary right now. Sung-hyuk completely snaps, charging the guy and demanding to know why he is busy making excuses for their enemies instead of giving him the answers he paid for. He grabs the suit by the collar to remind him who signs his paychecks, flexing that he carries the exact same last name as the big boss director. Pacing the room, he bitterly complains that his dad's goons were basically Navy SEALs when they were assigned to spy on him, but the second he actually needs them for a real fight, they turn totally useless. Whipping out a classic burner phone, he asks if the handler has any idea how he managed to survive in this garbage neighborhood for so long without getting packed in a box. He mutters that his dad's men never listened to him anyway, making it clear that his old man isn't the only one who came to this raid with a secret backup plan. Sung-hyuk grins at his flip phone like an anime villain who just monologued his entire master plan, bragging that he already calculated every single variable. On the other side of town, the handler pieces the puzzle together, realizing the presence of the Darum manpower crew changes the entire board. He looks at his team and deduces that the enemy forces are officially spread thin. One of his guys is busy interrogating a downed thug, treating the guy's skull like a magic 8-ball until he finally squeezes out a location in Guncheong. The bruised enemy swears on his life that he doesn't know anything else, crying like a captured NPC who just handed over the main quest coordinates. Moo-won snaps his head around as he receives an urgent request to redirect his boss to that exact neighborhood. Without waiting for an official green light, the kid in the hoodie launches himself out the door. The other handler desperately screams Do-yoon's name to try and reel him back in. Do-yoon ignores him completely, hitting a full sprint into the night and leaving his backup in the dust. Back inside Moo-won glares down at another bleeding thug trying to play dead on the floor, flatly telling the guy to quit faking because he knows he just heard their entire game plan. The suited enforcer glares down with glowing red eyes, asking his victim if he needs another serving of knuckle sandwiches to finally get the point across. Meanwhile, our boy sprints through the dark, empty streets like his life depends on it. He charges forward with a clenched fist, grumbling that taking down Choi Daeop would have been easy mode, but dealing with Hwang is an entirely different raid boss. His midnight marathon hits a brick wall when he runs straight into a squad of 5 local goons blocking the alley. The ringleader steps up, mocking Do-hafer finally showing his face after tucking his tail and dropping out of school ages ago. One of his lackeys spits on the ground, asking if the wild rumors about him taking out Sung-hyuk are actually true. The leader flashes a smug grin, questioning how a broke dropout with zero street cred managed to pull off a stunt like that. He rolls up his sleeves like he's clocking in for a shift at the local bullying factory, demanding to know why his crew has to clean up has messy leftovers. Ha just stares back with the blankest NPC expression imaginable, which immediately bruises the thug's fragile ego. Screaming for an answer, the goon launches a wild haymaker straight at his face. The lead thug completely loses his temper, grabbing his wrist to lock him in place for a massive haymaker. Ha perfectly parries the attack and instantly counters with a right cross straight to the guy's jaw. The impact sends the thug flying onto the pavement like a glitching ragdoll in a Bethesda game. The rest of his crew just stare in horror, suddenly realizing they heavily miscalculated the threat level. Ha locks his glowing eyes onto the remaining thugs, taunting them for still fighting with a playground mentality. The blonde lackey starts sweating bullets, muttering that Ha is completely out of his mind. Ha hunches over to catch his breath and lectures them that this exact weakness is why their boss and their entire crew are doomed to fail. Instead of taking notes, the blonde guy decides to smash the skip button on the villain monologue and charges forward. He closes the gap instantly and drives a vicious knee straight into his stomach. The hit completely folds our boy, sending him crashing hard onto the icy concrete. Ha catches his breath with a busted lip, looking like he just tanked an Elden Ring boss completely underleveled. The thug stands over him, dropping a lecture about how stepping outside the safety of school means facing real-world consequences. But Ha just gets right back on his feet and marches toward the group, cursing out Huang Sung Haya. He stares the thugs down, asking what the point even is of playing pretend delinquent at their age. Clenching his bloodied fist, he casually mentions that this sloppy ambush just confirms Huang is the one pulling their strings. The thugs instantly panic like NPCs whose pathfinding just broke, screaming at each other to call up the rest of their crew from downstairs. His eyes actually light up at the prospect of having more punching bags on the way. The remaining thugs totally lose their nerve and scramble back into the rainy alley, leaving their unconscious buddy eating pavement. Meanwhile, a couple of older enforcers are watching the whole brawl from a distance, deciding to let the kid handle his own bullies so he doesn't develop a complex about being helpless. The guy in the suit pats his tattooed buddy on the shoulder, pointing out that Ha is the same kid who begged their team leader to adopt him, proving he's way smarter than the rest of their muscle-brained crew. The gray-haired enforcer sighs, deciding they should just spectate the lobby a little longer, since they are basically out of side quests anyway. His partner in the brown suit points out that Choi Daeop is grinding way harder than usual today. Hapitui, he also notes that the Daram Manpower faction has spawned way more mobs than they originally calculated. The gray-haired guy figures they need to wipe out the Daram crew first as soon as they manage to secure Yoon. When asked about her status, he explains that the Daram guys are completely clueless about her whereabouts. Brown Suit decides to split the party, announcing he will go keep an eye on the Guncheong crew instead. Her P5, he tells his partner to shoot him a text if the aggro suddenly drops on him. Narrowing his eyes, he realizes that Choi and Director Wang splitting up is the perfect window to make a move. Meanwhile, in an undisclosed location, a thug hauls a fully bound hostage over his shoulder like a heavy loot drop. He carefully navigates the dark stairwell to keep his freshly taped package from tumbling down the steps. Outside in an alleyway, a mysterious figure happily hums a tune while walking off, receiving a polite thank you from a lackey for putting in the hard work. That lackey is currently carrying a kidnapped girl with green tape wrapped around her limbs, muttering about how he is learning valuable new life lessons today. Shapi Aliki apparently. Accessory to abduction comes with a free side of philosophical enlightenment for this guy. Outside, the enforcer in the beanie spies on a group of suits, muttering under his breath about how slick these guys have gotten. He ducks behind a wall and reports to base that the Daejeong crew is a complete no-show. Gripping his prehistoric flip phone like he's waiting for an extraction in a Metal Gear Solid mission, he asks for his next set of orders. Meanwhile, our main guy is looking slightly bruised and completely over it. He communicates his frustration by caving in a taped-up thug's chest with a heavy stomp. He stands over 3 unconscious bodies, exhaling like he just had to take out the trash on his day off. Staring down the alley, he asks the twitching pile if their entire master plan was just to stall him. One of the thugs desperately walks away, and our boy casually mentions how annoying this whole setup is. He drops into a crouch and aggressively pats the guy down while the thug stammers in pure panic. Treating the goon like a low-level mob with a guaranteed loot drop, he snatches a green flip phone from his pocket and announces he'll be taking it for a spin. The kid in the blue jacket completely loses his mind, screaming at our guy and demanding to know what he is talking about. Instead of answering with words, our boy lets his fist do the talking and delivers a vicious haymaker straight to the kid's jaw. He follows up with a ruthless stomp, dropping the thug to the concrete like a bad habit. Glaring down with borderline demonic red eyes, he asks if throwing hands isn't exactly what besties are supposed to do for each other. Standing victorious over the newly formed human speed bump, he announces he will be indefinitely borrowing the kid's phone. He casually flips open the ancient green device like it is 2005 all over again. The guy on the other end immediately starts barking orders, telling his goons to hurry up and take care of some beggar named Won-do Yoon. But our boy coldly warns Hwang Sung Hyuk to keep his mouth shut unless he is ready to meet his maker. He clarifies that he was only ever playing along and humoring Hwang at school to keep up appearances. The voice on the other end short circuits at the outright disrespect, completely breaking down and screaming to know why a piece of trash is answering the phone instead of his actual crew. Rather than deal with the temper tantrum, our guy just snaps the phone shut with a heavy sigh, acting like he just wrapped up the world's most annoying customer service call. Looking like a final boss entering his second phase, our guy smirks and confirms aloud that Hwang Sung Hyuk was pulling the strings all along. He raises his foot over the defeated thug's face, promising to finish the job so this guy never gets any bright ideas again. But right before he lands the Mortal Kombat fatality, he freezes mid-stomp, realizing he forgot something. His heavily tattooed backup interrupts the beatdown, telling him they need to head down. The big guy glances over his shoulder, warning him that their timer is running out. Deciding to spare the human punching bag, our boy shoves his hands in his pockets and follows his associate down the dark alley. He lets out a heavy breath, finally feeling the exhaustion of handing out two-piece combos all night. Without even looking back, he casually chucks the stolen green flip phone over his shoulder like a worthless piece of low-level loot. The device smacks against the concrete and skids across the floor. Right on cue, the screen lights up in the dark, buzzing with a desperate incoming call from Hwang Sung Hyuk himself. The tattooed backup calls dibs on riding in the back, looking completely unfazed by the chaos. The smirking boss, Park Jong-hyun, complains that the goons they just beat up aren't even their actual targets. He casually backhands one of the thugs across the face, warning him that things will get way worse if they try to pull a disappearing act. Park catches the guy glaring at him and asks what his problem is, flashing a smile that straight up belongs to a sleep paralysis demon. Suddenly, a squad of masked guys armed with pipes rolls up out of nowhere, demanding to know what all the commotion is about. Park realizes their client conveniently forgot to mention they would be fighting a whole raid boss squad tonight. He holds up his phone and complains that he needs a massive pay bump for dealing with this much extra aggro. Instead of wasting time negotiating, the tattooed enforcer just blitzes straight past him into the danger zone. The alley instantly turns into a massive mosh pit with fists flying and jaws getting completely rocked. One of the masked guys in a red jacket lands a devastating hook, turning an enforcer's face into a human blood fountain. Park is sweating bullets from the driver's seat, trying to figure out where the hell these high-level NPCs even came from. He curses under his breath, grumbling that he was told these guys were just low-level street trash scraping by on the edge of Guncheong-2-dong. Outside the windshield, his men are getting completely folded, with one enforcer eating a nasty right hook clean to the jaw. The masked attackers start spamming heavy attacks, landing punches so devastatingly hard that the goons are spitting blood like they just caught a Mortal Kombat fatality. Another suit gets his bell absolutely rung, while a bloodied thug screams back at the boss that their timer is up, and they need to bounce right now. Realizing his entire raid party is getting fully wiped, Park panics and white-knuckles the car frame, dropping a string of heavy curses. He lunges for the steering wheel, screaming back through the chaos that he already knows they are completely out of time. Watching his crew get stomped into the pavement through the windshield, he swears loudly about how fast this whole mission got totally botched. Eyes twitching in pure, unfiltered stress, he vows through gritted teeth that he will be back to settle the score with the Darum Manpower crew real soon. He slams the gas, ditching his remaining men without a second thought and leaving nothing but a thick cloud of dust as the van peels out hard. But the getaway hits a snag fast when a motorcycle suddenly wipes out across the asphalt directly ahead, grinding a massive trail of sparks and flames along the road. The getaway plan instantly goes up in smoke when Park's van plows straight over a downed motorcycle. Gripping the steering wheel for dear life, Park screams into the void, demanding to know what fresh disaster is ruining his night. Outside in the dust, the biker pushes himself up from the asphalt, casually brushing off the near-death experience. He breathes a sigh of relief, acting like he just survived a glitchy lobby in GTA Online instead of a massive collision. A sinister grin creeps across his face, and he mutters that he isn't even sure if he tracked down the right target. With his eye glowing a menacing crimson, he decides the details don't matter, declaring that everyone in the vicinity is about to die anyway. Meanwhile, across town, a completely different guy is busy caving in a thug's skull with a brutal right hook. He's practically sweating bullets, panicking to himself that he's going to be late. After delivering a nasty roundhouse kick that sends another goon to sleep, he spirals into a heavy guilt trip, agonizing over the fact that Yoon got hurt because of his own uselessness. His eyes fill with absolute regret as he realizes this disaster happened right after he promised to keep her safe. Standing over the wreckage of their street brawl, his ally scans the dark city skyline and urges him to hurry up before they run out of time. Two guys sprint down a dark alleyway like they're trying to outrun the shrinking zone in a battle royale. The kid in the hoodie starts hyperventilating apologies to his tattooed friend, blaming himself for dragging them into this massive mess with the local street punks. His buddy totally brushes it off, telling him they just caught a bad break. He stops dead in his tracks though, warning his friend that the neighborhood thugs aren't actually what he should be apologizing for. The hoodie kid's eyes go wide as the realization hits him. A lone silhouette blocks their escape route, standing under the streetlights like an unskippable cutscene boss. Meanwhile, the motorcyclist who just ate the front bumper of a speeding van casually kneels on the asphalt, brushing off the impact like a minor inconvenience. He looks up with glowing red eyes and a manic smirk, wondering aloud if he even stumbled into the right location. Deciding it doesn't matter, he happily declares that everyone in the immediate vicinity is about to die. Inside the crashed van, the driver violently slams his head against the steering wheel, realizing his botched getaway just unleashed a literal nightmare. The van driver grips the steering wheel and curses his luck for being trapped in this trashy neighborhood, complaining that the guy he just hit is a complete lunatic. Before he can even hit the gas, an arm shoots out from the back seat and locks around his throat like a Mortal Kombat grab animation. The driver chokes on his own breath as he gets violently yanked backward into his seat. His eyes bulge out of his skull while a woman pins him down in a tight hold. She shuts her eyes and channels a memory of a specific move. Her mind flashes back to a sunny courtyard where she watched a guy built like a brick wall teach a younger kid some hand-to-hand basics. She had paid close attention to the lesson, studying the exact mechanics of cutting off someone's air supply. The instructor demonstrated a flawless rear, naked choke on the poor kid, who looked like his soul was actively leaving his body. Snapping back to reality, she drags the driver over the center console, genuinely surprised that the self-defense class actually paid off. She momentarily regrets that these thugs forced her hand by ambushing them, but quickly shakes off the guilt and squeezes his neck even harder. The driver starts choking and blindly feeling around the door panel like a guy searching for his phone charger at 3 a.m. He manages to pop the latch, sending them both tumbling backward as the side door swings wide open. Using the momentum, the driver breaks the chokehold and shoves her violently onto the floor of the van. He rubs his bruised windpipe, cursing her out and admitting he genuinely thought he was about to meet his maker. Looming over her like a Five Nights at Freddy's animatronic, he screams that he originally planned to go easy on her since she wasn't technically his property. He grabs her by the throat, declaring that since the buyers lied to him first, the whole deal is scrapped and he's going to make her suffer. But before he can do anything worse, the psychotic motorcyclist suddenly materializes right over his shoulder with glowing red eyes, making the driver shriek. The biker grabs a fistful of the driver's jacket without saying a word. With one casual yank, he launches the heavy dude completely out of the van and onto the asphalt. Left alone in the back seat, the girl clutches her mouth in terror and asks if her new rescuer is planning on doing the exact same horrible things to her. Rubbing his bruised throat, the driver catches his breath on the pavement. He curses, admitting he was actually starting to wonder what kind of fearless heavyweights had ambushed his van. Staring down at the blue-haired motorcyclist, the driver sneers that his attacker might actually just be a weak little punk. To prove his point, the driver throws a wild right hook straight into the guy's jaw, screaming that it's clearly been way too long since someone gave him a proper beating. He mocks the kid's appearance, guessing he must have come into some quick cash, and asks if he completely lost his sanity after running out of things to pawn. Flashing an unhinged grin, the driver claims he only let him land that first hit, mocking him for getting so excited over a freebie. He vents about how aggravating his night has been, complaining that he was only holding back to keep things quiet, but is officially done playing nice. Calling the kid a maggot, the driver winds up for a massive haymaker, but the motorcyclist calmly sways backward like he's dodging a laggy Dark Souls boss. Before the driver can even recover his footing, our boy counters with a brutal straight punch right to the bridge of his nose. The driver stumbles backward in agony, while the motorcyclist drops into a fighting stance with his eyes glowing red, ready to clear out this tutorial mob. The blue-haired biker grabs the driver by his bleeding face, admitting he fully expected him to show up and was actually looking forward to the rematch. Leaning in close, he confesses that the only reason he ever played the loyal subordinate was because of the driver's tough financial situation. A flashback reveals their old Syndicate days, where the driver looks like he just failed an audition for the Yakuza game franchise, while arguing they need to keep a low profile. His subordinate, sporting his natural black hair back then, tries to pitch some highly questionable methods to make their gang's quota. The boss shuts him down immediately, declaring they aren't desperate enough for cash to start selling kids to shady establishments. This sends the subordinate into a panic about their profit margins, demanding to know how they plan to fake their financial reports to the Heekshong crime family. Playing the noble leader, the boss decides he will march right up to headquarters and smooth things over himself. But the subordinate cuts him off, pulling the ultimate in betrayal by revealing he already went behind his back and started the trafficking operation anyway. Back in the freezing present, the traitor hands out a devastating right hook. He shouts that a guy who buys loyalty like a pay-to-win mobile whale doesn't deserve the top spot, slamming his former boss into the concrete. Face mashed against the dirt, the driver grits his teeth in utter defeat. The subordinate follows up with a brutal right hook, completely shattering his former boss's guard. The driver's eyes go wide as the reality of his massive skill issue finally sets in. Desperate, he throws a wild haymaker, but the subordinate effortlessly slips right past the sloppy attack. Winding up a counter-strike, the subordinate locks onto his target with the intense focus of a Smash Bros. Player in a grand final. He connects with a massive blow that practically caves the driver's face in. The driver is sent flying backward, spitting blood as he gets completely laid out on the pavement. Standing over his old boss's crumpled body, the subordinate tells him that he'll be finding his proper place again soon and should look forward to it. Without hesitating, he grabs the unconscious man by the collar and starts dragging him across the concrete like an encumbered Skyrim player hauling dragon bones. Under the glow of a street lamp, he finishes zip, tying his former boss just as a bearded man casually strolls onto the scene. The newcomer observes the tied-up driver and notes that this crew wasn't even a proper military branch, just a subcontract for managing establishments. He smirks, adding that the Daejeon guys actually managed to use their heads a little this time around. The subordinate drags the unconscious driver down the dark alley by his ankles like he's taking out the trash on collection day. A girl with long dark hair shuffles up beside the bearded man as they overlook the glowing city skyline. He casually drops the news that 1A Yoon is going to be brought into his warehouse operation too. She quietly agrees, completely submitting to his authority. He praises her decision, explaining that drowning in debt and losing her mind like some punk named Do, Yoon is basically playing life on ultra nightmare difficulty. He suddenly stops dead in his tracks and lets out a dry laugh. Yoon tries to protest, stuttering out a pathetic attempt at an excuse. Her words die in her throat as her expression drops into a blank stare. Her eyes stretch wide in sheer panic as an earth-shaking rumble approaches. A heavy-duty excavator completely obliterates the concrete wall next to them like the Kool-Aid man making a hostile entrance. The driver casually rubs his head inside the dusty excavator cab and asks if it's been a while since they last met. He immediately starts screaming for team leader Kim Moo-won, complaining that they were given strict orders to pull out of the area. The guy looks completely exasperated, acting like a stressed-out supervisor who just realized his entire team muted the company Slack channel. Kim stares back with absolute shock, demanding to know who just parked heavy construction equipment inside his building. The intruder hops down from the wreckage and mocks Kim for going senile so fast, officially introducing himself as Shin Deok-cheol, a career assistant manager for a local demolition crew. Shin flashes a smug little smile to make sure the name really sinks in. He struts forward through the settling dust like a WWE heel walking down the entrance ramp, brushing off his stagnant 11-year career as a minor detail. Straightening his cuffs, Shin explains that his job title doesn't matter half as much as the mandatory withdrawal order he's bringing. He forcefully slaps a white envelope against Kim's chest, openly admitting he would have preferred to just flatten the entire block, but management specifically restricted him to a warning today. Looking out toward the sunset, Shin lets out a sinister chuckle and complains about how annoyingly hard it is to kill a certain someone off for good. Shin flexes his fist, calling a quick beatdown an early present so he won't have to drag Kim's unconscious body away later. He adjusts his glasses and orders his target to show a little respect. Grabbing Kim by the hair, Shin demands a proper bow, reminding him of his place in the old corporate food chain. Kim carelessly swats the guy's hand away like a mildly annoying mosquito and tells him to knock it off. Shin smirks and mocks Kim for acting tough around the exact guy who took the disciplinary fall for his past mistakes, daring him to make a move. Instead of taking the PvP bait, Kim turns his back and calmly asks if Shin is really prepared to handle the fallout if he walks away right now. Shin grits his teeth, his brain buffering with pure frustration. Clenching his fists, Shin forces himself to back down and issues a strict 1-month deadline. His eyes glow red as he repeats the time frame, trying desperately to maintain some scrap of boss-level authority. Completely ignoring the threat, Kim casually strolls past, prompting Shin to throw an angry swing at the back of his head while cursing about his flimsy justifications. Shin totally whiffs his sneak attack and screams in rage like a Smash Bros. Player who just SD'd on their final stock. Kim just keeps walking away, completely unbothered by the temper tantrum happening behind his back. Seething with anger, Shin vows to spread the word to the rest of the Brotherhood about this blatant disrespect. Kim barely acknowledges the threat, maintaining the stone, cold expression of a guy who has way bigger problems on his plate. A nervous bystander clutches her fists and asks what in the world is happening. Her question is immediately answered by a massive yellow excavator violently breaching the concrete wall like a construction-grade Kool-Aid man. Hanging upside down from the machine's bucket is Shin, completely hog-tied, gagged, and whimpering through the green tape. Kim sits calmly at his desk in the newly ventilated room, noting that the Hyeksong company chose a highly suspicious time to send Shin to his doorstep. He stares down at a crumpled warning notice demanding financial explanations by next month, realizing that facing an internal investigation right now is definitely not a coincidence. His subordinate chimes in to question the document's validity, reminding Kim that Shin is the kind of demolition meathead who literally turns down promotions just so he can keep breaking stuff out in the field. Taeju's eyes glow red like he just activated his Sharingan, eagerly volunteering to hit the front lines and handle the mess quietly before it spirals out of control. Kim leans back like he's spectating a Twitch stream, telling his subordinate it's way too early to act and ordering him to leave Shin alone so they can watch the chaos unfold a bit longer. Taeju gives a stiff nod of obedience, dropping his aggro and falling back in line. Yoon slumps into a chair nearby, sweating bullets and letting out a heavy sigh now that she isn't actively about to get murdered. Taeju checks her HP to see if she's holding up, and she awkwardly admits she's completely traumatized but forces a laugh, hoping she can just walk off the PTSD eventually. Flipping the script, she asks if he is doing all right, pointing out that he seems tangled up in an insane amount of underworld drama. Taeju brushes off her concern entirely, claiming this whole disaster class might actually be a massive W for their long-term plans. Relieved that they aren't totally doomed, she nervously asks for permission to interrogate him about one little detail. She presses him on whether he knows the absolute madman driving the excavator, noting the guy had a seriously unhinged glare. Taeju starts dropping the driver's lore, triggering a flashback to his own high school days, where he looked like an angsty anime protagonist straight out of a My Chemical Romance music video. A lone teenager stands victorious over 3 unconscious bodies in a dark alley, demanding to know who is watching him. A guy in a dress shirt steps out of the shadows, introducing himself as Shin Deok-cheol and admitting he really respects the kid's specific brand of crazy. Shin slides over a business card like an NPC handing out a faction quest, offering the boy a lucrative job at a major company. The card reveals Shin is an assistant manager for Hyeksong Corporation's Demolition Team 3. Shin playfully kicks a heavy sledgehammer across the pavement, explaining that the entire foundation of their demolition crew is built on pure violence. Leaning in close with an unhinged smile, he details the job description, which basically boils down to caving in the skulls of anyone blocking their path. The heavy steel hammer scrapes against the concrete, throwing sharp sparks into the night air. Blood-stained gloves tighten their grip around the thick wooden handle as Shin prepares to demonstrate his violent philosophy. He winds up for a massive swing with a psychotic grin, but the kid abruptly rejects the job offer by launching a flying dropkick right at his head. Before Shin can even process the counterattack, the teenager caves his face in with a devastating right hook, dropping the manager's health bar to 0 in a flawless 2-hit combo. A lunatic with glowing glasses brings down a massive sledgehammer, swinging it like he is trying to secure a high score on a construction site whack-a-mole machine. The gray-haired guy mumbles that this aggressive backstory isn't exactly appropriate for kids, but admits the hammer-wielding maniac is the sole reason he met brother Mu-wan. Yoon tries to process these messy adult circumstances and quietly questions what she is supposed to do next. Her train of thought is derailed when the teenager bursts through the door screaming her name, flanked by a massive dude rocking full Yakuza-style sleeve tattoos. He completely ignores the rest of the room and sprints straight toward Yoon, catching her completely off guard. She immediately breaks down in tears and throws her arms around him for a desperate hug. Watching this touching reunion is a bearded man who looks like he hasn't slept a full 8 hours since the PlayStation 3 era. The gray-haired guy just narrows his eyes, glaring at the newcomers with heavy suspicion. The tattooed heavyweight steps up to the bearded man to apologize for his tardiness, prompting the exhausted boss to ask if any other trouble went down outside. The tattooed guy promises to deliver a full debrief later, but gets entirely distracted by the room's chaotic decor, forcing the boss to clarify whether he is asking about the giant excavator or the random dude currently hanging from the ceiling. The bearded boss mentions that headquarters sent down someone named Shin Deok-cheol, taking it as a massive hint from corporate telling them to pack up and drop the job. The gray-haired subordinate is completely confused, pointing out that sending an assistant manager from the demolition team instead of an actual HR rep makes absolutely zero sense. The boss figures corporate is just getting paranoid because their crew has been stuck like glue to a guy named Choi Dae. Yep. Shifting focus from the corporate drama, the gray-haired thug politely interrupts the massive tattooed man. He points down at the guy currently bound and gagged on the floor, asking what the game plan is for their captive. All the blood rushing to the poor dude's head has completely jolted him awake, leaving his eyes bulging in pure panic. The bearded boss casually declares that since the guy stepped way out of line, they should just go ahead and permanently delete his save file. The gray-haired thug happily accepts the execution order, strolling over to the massive excavator claw now dangling the man upside down over the rubble. With his gag removed, the suspended manager starts screaming for mercy, whining that he's just a desk jockey and never would have touched the teenager if he knew he was the mob boss's son. Unfazed, the gray-haired thug squats down next to the human pendulum and mocks him, asking why he dropped the tough guy act he had going when he was handing out assignments. The subordinate asks the bound man if he remembers his own advice about desperate guys needing to act like dogs. He tilts his head and casually mentions that he definitely doesn't see a dog swinging upside down in front of him. Taking the hint, the captive immediately starts barking and hopping around in his bindings. The boss just squats there, watching the guy put on his best golden retriever impression to try and survive. Between desperate woofs, the captive claims he actually has a brilliant plan to help them out. The gray-haired subordinate just scowls and curses in pure annoyance. He orders the captive to shut up, complaining that this pathetic display is terrible for the younger gang members' upbringing. Without missing a beat, he snaps the gag right back over the barking man's mouth. He lets out an exhausted sigh and calls the guy an absolute lunatic. Raising his hand for the final signal, he declares that this barking weirdo is completely beyond saving. Right before the execution can go down, the teenager steps up from the background and tells the older guy to wait a second. Ignoring the kid's quick time event completely, the subordinate pulls the release, dropping the captive directly onto the concrete like a laggy NPC glitching through the floor. The teenager instantly closes the gap, snatching the man by the collar like he caught him trying to swipe his Uber Eats order. He gets right up in his face, demanding to know what exactly this guy can actually do to prove his worth. The man breaks into a panicked sweat, his eyes going wide as he receives a grim warning to weigh his next words very carefully. With his pupils glowing red, our boy makes it crystal clear that this response better be a top-tier drop if the guy wants to avoid the respawn screen. Thanks for watching. Check out this next video.